Microphone. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the San Ramon Valley Unified School District Board of Education meeting. We want to let the public know that we are video recording today's meeting. The recording is being live streamed on the district's YouTube channel, and a link to the recording has been posted to the district's website. I'd like to introduce my board members. To my right is Vice President Ken Rent, Clerk Rachel Hurd.
Hello.
On the left, our board members Laura Bratt
Hello.
and Shelley Clark. And I'm your president, Susanna Wardway. Hey, I'd like to, before we start, before we begin our meeting, I'd like to take a moment, and my notes on my phone, so sorry I didn't print it out. So this will be the only time I'm using my phone tonight. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are all collectively feeling stressed and anxious due to continuing changes with the pandemic. And I'd like to also welcome you all back to the in-person meeting. So thank you for indulging us for the change of location. And even after a year, right, of being in this crisis, new information is still coming at us when all we want is a bit of stability and consistency. That's why I want to thank everyone for making the most recent change in getting our hybrid students back on school sites 4 days a week. Thank you to the district and site staff, certificated, classified, and non-classified employees, students, and parents for another reopening. I also want to acknowledge our students and families who continued with remote learning because they may be anxious that the change may affect them as well. And though for most of them, they may not feel any impacts directly with their learning or schedules, this is still a change for our school community, and they're part of our community. Thanks for allowing me to say that. And now let's please join me in Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, 6.0, report of action taken in closed session. We actually didn't finish our business in closed session, so we're gonna go back, return to a closed session after our open session, and then we'll report back out after any action. 7.0, acceptance of minutes. May I have the motion to accept the minutes of March 2nd, 2021, March 3rd, and March 11th, 2021?
So moved.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Bratt. Call out vote. Board Member Clark? Aye. Board Member Bratt?
Aye.
Board Member Hurd?
Aye.
Board Member Mintz?
Aye.
Board Member Ordway?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Okay. Great. And then 8.1, acceptance of open session agenda. May I have the motion to accept tonight's open session agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made by Board Member Mintz and seconded by Board Member Hurd. Call out vote. Board Member Clark?
Aye.
Board Member Bratt?
Aye.
Board Member Hurd?
Aye.
Board Member Mintz?
Aye.
Board Member Ordway?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
And we're going on to 8.2, approval of consent agenda. Consent items are considered and are approved by combining them into a single vote. A member of the board or a member of the public may request that a consent item be removed from the consent agenda to be considered and voted on separately. And I believe I do have a card from the public who would like to have agenda items pulled. So we're going for 11.7, 11.8, 11.9, 11.10, and 11.14.
I
And
would
they
ask
will-
that agenda item 11.11.
And 11.11? Okay, so starting with 11.7, it's going to go after 10.4. Okay,
I'll move approval of the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Mintz. Call up vote. Board Member Clark,
Aye.
Board Member Bratt, Board Member Hurd,
Aye.
Board Member Mintz,
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Okay. So now we're moving on to 9.0, reports to the board. 9.1, Autism Awareness Month. I believe it's Deanna Zappia, our ELAELD coordinator. Help us with this one.
President Ordway. My name is Anna LA. Honored our board celebrate however that we have set aside collaborative autism spectrum broad range by challenge autism affects autism affects one in fastest growing developmental disorders in the United States. Boys are 5 times more likely to have autism, and there is currently no medication, protection, or cure for autism. This year, the World Autism Society is asking us to light it up blue on April 2nd, which is National Autism Week. Focus of the month of April is kindness. As we embrace our differences, we are asked kindness, learn with kindness, connect with kindness, share with kindness, give of ourselves. Autism Awareness Month is Visibility Awareness Month at many of our elementary sites. Ability awareness events provide awareness and learning opportunities for all students and staff as it relates to the abilities of persons with special needs, literacy, question and answer opportunities, and hands-on experience. Form partnerships that provide them with time to work together, explore different ways, and engage in activities with passion as well as all throughout the year, our students have opportunities to interact, art, play, acting, sports. Students learn to appreciate that we are unique, special. Kindness and compassion is taught through activities such as morning meetings, art lessons, special buddies. Compassion, love, empathy, laughter, and strength are characteristics found in us. I encourage us to embrace the qualities of remember that in a world where
Thank you so much, Deanna. Our next 9.2, Day of Silence. And I believe Ashley Gutierrez, Equity Coordinator. That's with that one.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. McCoy, and the SRVUSD. It is my pleasure to be half of the Day of Silence. In 1996, the Day of Silence is an opportunity to observe a day-long vow of silence symbolizes the silencing effect of LGBTQIA+ bullying and harassment. This year's Day of Silence on February 23rd and will be celebrated across all 50 states and many countries worldwide. The celebration is observed through a number of social media campaigns which highlight opportunities for students to raise their voice after celebrating their Day of Silence. Educators who are interested in supporting our students can find this educator's guide on the GLSEN website, full of recommendations, tools, and resources to support our LGBTQIA students and ensure that their experiences are never silenced in our. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Moving on to 9.3, public comment for non-agenda items. Okay, let me read this, and I actually think I have a card for comment on this item. Okay, so comment will be limited to no longer than 3 minutes. The views expressed during public comment are those of the individual speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views of the board or district staff. The district believes in an inclusive, welcoming, and safe environment for its all of our community. The board respects each individual's rights to express ideas and opinions. Pursuant to applicable law and board policy, the board will not prohibit public criticism of the board district. We kindly ask that when making public comment, you refrain from the use of profanity, exercise tolerance of others and their viewpoints, and exemplify model behavior. Please be mindful that district students may be watching. You are encouraged to address the board and the public in a respectful manner such that all those observing, from children to adults, are feel welcome, safe, and respected. The board will not permit any disturbance or willful interruption of board meetings. Persistent or excessive disruption by any individual or group shall be grounds to terminate the privilege of addressing the board. I think I'm going to start with for this item, it's Helen of the Doherty Valley on item 9.3.
Good evening, SRVUSD officials. I want to request two things because of the consent agenda 11.7 is requesting the board to authorize a bank account for our business office, which triggers my public antenna to make sure that there is no room for corruption or infiltration, as we know that at the higher education in this country, we're seeing some.
Well, I'm sorry, Helen, but I think this is on your card for 9.3, not 11.7, which is now 10.5.
If you listen to my intro, this is the two things that's why I'm requesting. Two things I will be requesting is for the business office to disclose to the public any Communist Chinese origin employees that still are affiliated with Communist Chinese Party. I think as the public, we have the right to know that because we don't want the district to use tax dollars to do business with any foreign state. The second thing I would like to request is if the district intends to do any business with any companies that are affiliated with the state of the Communist China, that we, the public, have the right to know. So I'm requesting for disclosure under employees in the business office who has the Communist Chinese affiliation to be disclosed, as well as the business that will be done with any companies that has affiliation with the state of Communist China.
Continuing with public comment, Tracy Tierney.
Hi, I'm Tracy Tierney, and I'm a second grade hybrid teacher at Neil Armstrong Elementary. I'm standing before you tonight for reasons. Comments made by some members of this board and management team last Thursday were hurtful and dismissive. I promise you, we were not asking to hold off starting full-day hybrid until after spring break because we wanted to make cutesy bulletin boards and name tags. We needed time to rework lesson plans and wrap up units of study. We needed time to figure out how and when our students with IEPs were going to be serviced. Although we were assured schedules would not change, they did. We, the hybrid teachers, were literally left with a few hours on Monday to get everything in place for a full-day return on Tuesday. We were told not to worry about curriculum, to spend this week building a classroom community. I assure you, I have been building and fostering a classroom community for the past 137 days. If given a few extra days, the district would have heard that elementary school sites needed Chromebooks for their hybrid classes so they could access their learning specialists such as PE, science, and music. We deserve to have the tools to be successful. Now, I can't speak for all teachers, but I know I speak for many. Our cups are overflowing, our plates are full, we are running on empty. When we are not teaching, we are fulfilling our adjunct duties by attending PTA, academic booster, and Servia meetings. We sit on SST, leadership, STEM, and safety committees, meetings, and trainings. We are planning and prepping curriculum, grading papers, and assessments. Elementary teachers supervise children before and after school and during recess. 51 yard duties and 20 to put together a virtual open house. Is it really needed? Our families have spent an entire school year in our classrooms. Why have a traditional open house in this non-traditional year? Please take something off our plate so we can focus on what is really important, our students, our own families, and our own well-being. Please cancel the virtual open house. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Mitchell Hobson.
Hello, I am Mitchell Hopkins from Alabama University. We are a community-based grassroots organization based trying to convene local. We are a grassroots organization based on working being regularly to discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion, and navigating change on DI subjects and assessment. We applaud the ceremony by Unified School District Board of Education for the move to implement strategic plan because the critical issue of equity, social, and emotional well-being for our youth in this district. We believe system-wide stakeholder engagement and honest analysis are critical for implementing positive change, and we are encouraged by recent action. We also believe everyone from elected officials to our neighbors have a role in creating an environment of diversity, equity, and inclusion where we all can. Those who come before this board, before this body should not be allowed to talk off topic in terms of racist or homophobic threats, hate, and discrimination. This occurred especially after students have the courage to speak in support of measures that would make them feel comfortable, welcome, and supported in our district. We need the San Ramon Valley First Coalition to support the efforts of this body to keep dialogue at these meetings on substance and to reject off-topic and baseless insults that are targeted at members of our community. And I think
Thank you, Mitchell. Matthew Hoffman.
First, thank you all for this day today of allowing the kids back full time in class, for bringing us here together in person. It's a new experience, and it's with picking up my kids at an elementary school today. You could see everyone around, and the emotions ranged from elation to relief to just excitement. It was a great experience, and it was something that reminded us all so much of getting back to normal. And I think that without your actions last week, that wouldn't have been possible. So thank you for what you did for this community. To the prior comment, talking about the time, I can't agree more. We all need more time. We all need more time to deal with the changes that are going on, with the new experiences that we have to deal with. We don't have to. The time is running out. What we do have, though, is money. People do talk about time and money being interchangeable in some degrees, and I think in this case it can be. So what I'm asking for is for this board here to consider making resources available to each one of the school sites, perhaps the ed funds or the other booster organizations, to help support these teachers in this time of change, where we could then get resources that they need to take these items off of their plate and still maintain the same level of excellence that we're all used to in this school district. If we can do this in some kind of temporary fashion, I think it would not only help these teachers now in the short term, but I think it would also bolster the community and show that the community that this board right here is ready to invest back into the community that was so stricken by the pandemic and these ed funds that were decimated by fundraising in the past 2 years. So thank you for that consideration. I think if you can figure out a way to make that happen in maybe not this agenda, but perhaps the next one, with all this money that's going around, I think that would be a great step forward to building up that community confidence and coalition that we are looking to get together. So thank you for your consideration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, moving on to 9.4, Association President's Comments. Okay, I think for joining us is Laura Finko. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do my best to use my teacher voice here. Hi, y'all. My name is Laura Finko. For those of you that don't know me, I am the Vice President of the San Ramon Valley Education Association, and I proudly declare that my pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I also respectfully and honorably acknowledge the land that we are on today is that of the traditional lands of the Ohlone people. I bring with you a message from Ann Katzberg, President of Servia, who is not able to be here this evening with commitments with family. So I'm going to read her comments this evening. So thank you for allowing me the time to address you. Ann writes, I said in my Monday mentionings, kind of have to think of me now channeling my inner Ann Katzberg. Our educators are excited to be back. We are back in our classrooms full time with a portion of our student population now that hybrid is officially behind us. It goes without mentioning, the decision for our return was made by you just 5 days ago, and it is important to illustrate that there are a lot of complexities in meeting the needs of our students as we continue to deal with the threat of more COVID variants during the pandemic. To assist our students in getting the best possible education, it will take Servia partnering on a daily basis with management. We know our students deserve the best, not just the minimum. Our Servia members know that this is necessary, and why we are involved in our Support Our Student campaign. So here are the 3 pillars of our Support Our Student campaign and what we must achieve to guarantee the best education for our students. Number 1, we need to focus on the social emotional well-being of our students. Servia members and management must invoke the cuts in psychologists and counselors contained in the 2019-2020 agreement. We need more support for our students. Number two, we need adequate funding for our students now and in our future. I'm working with our state legislators around the essential components at a state level. As our Board of Education trustees, you have other avenues to securing funding, and I know it's imperative to investigate what you can do for our students. Number three, all of our students need to be fully staffed. All of our schools need to be fully staffed. We need more counselors. Our counselors at the middle school ratio is too high for meeting the needs of our students. And sadly, we have 0 counselors at our elementary schools. Our counselors are overworked at the high school, especially this year when the logistics of multiple changes has taken over their responsibilities and they are spread too thin. Better ratios must be in our contract. Why? Because in order to hire the best employees, we need security. Knowing the programs we're building to support the well-being of our students will be sustained over time. We need this now more than ever. When we partner on the needs of our students, we know that we can achieve the best education for our students. SRVUSD executive members met with our members to gather information we can support our students through the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year. We got input from everyone. Group decisions are always better than single decisions, as the process enriches the discussion. Ideas are developed and decisions should not be made unilaterally. Your decision to start back on March 29th had failed to address the following issues that were forward last week and continued to be communicated to SRVUSD leadership over the weekend and these last couple of days. It will be our ask to allow for your decision-making process to include a more thoughtful, realistic, and demonstrated true partnership, allowing for all the problems arising to be addressed collaboratively. When the Board of Trustees pursues a decision-making process outside with its employees, these problems arise, exist, and are often left unaddressed. It's important to emphasize our members' life circumstances vastly differ, and the ability to pivot as well as the well-being of individual members composing the fabric of your workforce is unique for each individual. For some, the changes may be easy. For others, it's nearly impossible. Our members share that their anxiety is increasing with each pivot you are making. Others who must return, even if they are teaching remotely, are also greatly impacted by these changes. I would like to share with you an email received last night from one of our remote teachers. When there is one group affected, the other group is also affected. Personal story time. I have had to, like everyone, choose between work and family during the weeks and the weekends. It is rough to balance the work and personal life in this situation. It is awful that any of us have to make this decision. I want to spend time with my 2.5-year-old and my 2-month-old sons, and also with my wife, God forbid. But I have to make a decision to either do that or be behind and not give my remote students the same opportunity afforded those back in person. I feel that our remote students and their parents are an afterthought in the district's eyes, and honestly fear for their well-being moving forward. As a remote teacher, I feel deeply and strongly for the rights of those teachers who are teaching in full person now. I want for them to get everything that they need and deserve to be able to do their jobs effectively and safely. I also feel that as a remote teacher, we are looked at almost as a second-hand citizen, even though we're doing the same amount of work as our colleagues. The divide that has been propagated between teachers in person and those in remote needs to be closed. Secondly, Anne writes, the fury in which the changes are made creates a tidal wave of uncertainty and immense work for all of us. Our table team devoted nearly 20 hours in negotiations, and we weren't able to reach a tentative agreement until yesterday on our MOU, which we still need to ratify. Dr. Malloy shared how our site administrators would handle all of the nuances, but often they don't have the answers. For example, the change from 6 feet to 3 feet necessitated reworking the space on the playground, a reconfiguration of ingress and egress where the students can sit during lunch in inclement weather, how they can use their gym, and the list goes on. Logistics have an impact. In the voices of our members, I'd like to share what they've told me. Every time we have to shift to something new, we lose instructional time. I worry about how much more the Wi-Fi will fail with the many extra bodies on campus. Current hybrid students have already told us that they have been having trouble with the Wi-Fi. And it is even more of a learning loss when we can't teach our lessons because the Wi-Fi fails. And then Anne further goes on to say that there's a question of equity. As one member writes, ultimately, what bothers me most about this forced return to school site is the glaring inequality of the treatment of remote and hybrid teachers. As a remote teacher, I've been largely ignored. The gifts and pep talks have all been going to the hybrid teachers, and I get it. I deal with that. However, what I don't understand is why I'm responsible for teaching 120 minutes more than the hybrid teachers. Now that is something which needs to be addressed. Since the cohorts are now dissolved, hybrid teachers are not responsible for direct teaching during special subjects. So now, not only do I have to teach more, I have to spend even more time covering the yard duties and traffic duties. Anne closes in saying, our members have stated to me time and time again that they fear their concerns are falling on deaf ears. I don't believe that is the case. I believe that you all care deeply about the students in San Ramon Valley. I believe that you want our students' emotional well-being to be paramount in the decisions you make. That is why I'm reaching out to you again in true partnership, knowing that in order for our students to get the education they deserve, we must move forward allowing their voices of everyone to be considered when making decisions for our students. So please join us in the SRVUSD Support Our Student campaign. Thank you for listening to the voices of our member, as I am the proud president of nearly 1,700 members. Thank you on behalf of Ann Casper.
Thank you, Laura. Tammy?
Good evening. I'm Tammy Castelluccio, president of CSEA. I would again like to congratulate all of our classified employees of the year, and especially Dan Liu for being chosen as the district-wide classified employee of the year. I want to thank Keith, Superintendent John Malloy, and the board for the virtual classified employee celebration that happened earlier this evening. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank all of our classified employees that again have had to pivot on a dime to bring our hybrid students back to 4 days in-person instruction this week. I would especially like to thank all of our child nutrition employees who have been working for our students since last March when the shutdown occurred to feed all of our students, and the work that you all did this week to pivot. We know it has not been easy for you all to pivot. We are eternally grateful for you all. We are very glad that we are able to bring back our hybrid students in secondary yesterday and elementary today back to 4 days of instruction. Thank you all for making this happen, as we know that was what is best for students. And I'm wishing everyone a much deserved and much needed spring break next week. We're in the home stretch. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. 10.0, we're moving on to action items. 10.1, update on state testing, CAS, and ELPAC.
Hello, Board of Education. My name is Gregory Duran, and I work in Ed Services, and I'm responsible for looking after all of the mandated state testing. I wanted to give you an update on where we are with the mandated testing, in particular the smarter balancing and the LPAC. So, in working with our stakeholders at the school sites, one of the things we were really struggling with was how we minimize the impact on teaching and learning. And this is really a struggle at the site level, because we're going to have to reorganize a special testing schedule like we traditionally have done. But the state has come through with some new guidance. And this guidance is still pending approval by the U.S. Department of Education. But in talking with the state, they are feeling comfortable and optimistic that the U.S. Department of Education will give us this guidance. So this guidance is as following. So the first thing is the science tests for 5th, 8th, and high school are waived for this year. The second one is for ELA and math. We can use a viable option in our content. So that means we could use our FastBridge assessment platform because we've used that consistently at all school sites from grades 1 through grades 11. These assessments need to be aligned to the Common Core State California standards, which they are. The results need to be reported to our parents and educators and to the public, and we have the ability to do that. And these guidance also says these assessments will be decoupled from federal accountability requirements, and they waive any federal penalties for student participation rates that are less than 95%. So that is the guidance we've gotten from the state, and it's really intriguing to our school sites and our testing team because it addresses that whole impact on teaching and learning. But again, I want to stress that's still dependent on the U.S. Department of Education approving California's proposal. So as such, our recommendation to the board is that we use our FastBridge assessment platform in lieu of the Smarter Balance assessments. And for our English learner students, we continue with the state LPAC testing because that has a big benefit to kids that want to be reclassified English proficient. So our LPAC testing is in process right now. Now for our 11th grade students, as you know, the Smarter Balance exam comes with this program called the EAP. And the EAP is used by the UC and the CSU system to place students into their first entry English class or math class. The EAP is not used for admission purposes. So for our 11th graders, we'd like to give them the option, if they so choose, to take the Smarter Balance exam in addition to the FastBridge exam. So we give our 11th graders that option that would want the Smarter Balance EAP results if they are interested in that placement in the CSU and UC. And for our special education students, we will continue having them take the California Alternative Assessment, known as the CAA, and if that's available, if it's noted in the students' IE plan. So again, this was a plan that was been built up by our site testing teams, and we've gotten the guidance from the state, and we feel this would be a very efficient way for SRVUSD to move forward in getting some important data for our students. Next slide is what does FastBridge tell us? I want to give you just a picture of what FastBridge tells us. So this is the district level view of the FastBridge results. And on the left-hand side is the EA reading, and the right-hand side is A math. So FastBridge comes with an adaptive reading assessment and an adaptive math assessment. And what we're looking for is the students to score in the purple category, which is called low risk or the college pathway. And what we do not want to see kids is in the high risk or the some risk category. So this is just sort of a picture of where we are as a district right now in the reading and the math area. So I also want to stress that FastBridge is not as research-based as the Smarter Balance exam is. And it needs to be used as part of a multiple measurement system. And the multiple measurements we have this school year are things like what the teachers are observing in the classroom as measured by the report card grade, the formative assessment teachers are giving in addition to FastBridge, also the FastBridge data. So this is part of a multiple measurement approach. Okay, the next slide is this is what it looks like at a student level for English language arts. So FastBridge only measures reading. It's not measuring anything with regards to writing or listening, other things that come with the Smarter Balance exam. So what this is showing is this was a 5th grade class. And 5th grade for me has always been an important measurement because this is really telling us how kids are going to be able to start accessing the secondary curriculum. And what this is showing is that we still need some work to do with this group of kids as they're moving from their 5th grade into their 6th grade program with regards to the writing. So FastBridge will flag students with the risk categories, and that's sort of something that will, as part of a multiple measurement system, give us some more information on how we need to start supporting students that perhaps are not ready to access the next school year's grade level standard. Next slide. So in the math area, it's the same thing. It measures the early math, which is very similar to early reading, because early math in particular really is important with that go around place value, but it also is measuring how kids are doing with just accessing their vocabulary, being able to understand what words mean, and then putting all this together from an overall reading point of view. So this is sort of a little picture of what the FastBridge data will give us as an organization. And it, again, needs to be used as part of a multi-measurement. So the schedule we have laid out right now is on the bottom, the two arrows pointing down, is we've gotten guidance from the State Board of Education on February 24th and March 16th. That's still pending U.S. Department of Education approval. But again, the CDE and my contacts at the CDE are feeling positive and optimistic that approval will be coming. And we've got our LPAC summative ongoing right now. We've got a great LPAC examiner team. Go LPAC examiners. Thank you so much there. And on the top bar is we would be implementing the FastBridge assessment as part of our routine process, which is the spring screen. It will be used in lieu of the Smarter Balance exam. And a time frame, we're going to have to squeeze this in between the AP testing, is to make the 11th grade SBAC optional for 11th graders that would like to opt in. I'd also like to point out on this calendar here, if for some reason the U.S. Department of Education does not approve California's proposal, we're going to have to pivot in May, implement the Smarter Balance exam, and that would mean a schedule disruption and some impact teaching and learning. But again, right now, DE is feeling positive and optimistic that we will be getting that approval from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gregory.
Yeah, Greg, thank you very much. One question I have has to do with how we handle our remote versus in-person students when it comes to testing.
So with FastBridge, one thing we learned from the fall screen is how to do that. And with FastBridge, we do not need any of the special browsers. So kids can just run that with the platform they're using right now to access. With the Smarter Balance exam, that requires the students to have to download a special browser from the state, or we would need to provide it with our own, providing a SRVUSD issued Chromebook for students that perhaps couldn't download that secure browser.
Any questions from the board? I do have a public comment. So I want to get any. Okay, then Helen of Doty Valley. Item.
Hi, Mr. Duran. Thank you so much for having this conference. I trust you very much from the past experience. I do have some questions as a parent. I don't have trust in our governor, Newsom. He is someone who would shortchange our students, and he does business with weird people. Like when he tried to source our masks, he went to China. So I'm wondering, who company that designed FastBridge country came up with this program? I'm thinking it's a program unless it's an app. And I'm wondering how will be the scores? And then what about next year? I mean, could we be doing something like Greek, and then next year nobody knows how to read Greek? So what is the point for going FastBridge as a whole state? What a waste of money and time when we already have Smart and Balance, and the entire country is with Smart and Balance. So why does California always have to be different? I suspect that it's politics more than academics. And I'm wondering for those students who want to apply out of state, or if they should move out of state, with this score, nobody knows how to read it if we deviate from the national standards of Smart and Balance. And then I also am wondering if have this fast bridge in such a short time. And Serbia just mentioned you guys are loading so much on the teachers because they're learning so many different things. Isn't this another one of what the president just mentioned that you guys are trying to add to their plate that they don't need? I think most of our teachers in the district know how to administer smart and balanced, but what is fast bridge? I ask the district and the board to please vote down on this program, which is expensive, unnecessary, and add on to our teacher. Thank you.
Yeah, so I believe, right, that we've been using FastBridge. It's not something that's new.
Yes, the FastBridge implementation is far easier than Smarter Balance for two reasons. One is it doesn't require the secure browser technology download, and it's already built into the teacher's instructional program because we've built it in as part of the assessment platform for this school year. So teachers have done it in the fall and the winter, and there's minimal impact on the teaching instruction schedule because it's already built into the instructional plan that are already developed. Whereas SBAC would require a whole new schedule.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or clarification? If not, can I ask a motion?
I'll make a motion, but first I also want to address that the SBAC ASP results have nothing to do with college admissions either. So that other point is moot as well. So I'll move approval of the recommendation from staff regarding testing this school.
I'll second.
The motion.
Aye.
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 Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gregory. Okay, 10.2, consideration approval of contract for learning management system. Chris George.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. My name is Christopher George. Thank you, trustees, for having us here tonight. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the Learning Management System Selection Task Force. We are here to present a report and a recommendation of our work this year. Throughout the year, we have been meeting to make a final recommendation on a learning management system for use for all of our staff, students, and families for the 21-22 school year. This is a big decision. This is a piece of software that will be touched by every student, every family, every staff member for the foreseeable future. And we don't want to underestimate, where we are and how important this decision is. But it's a pleasure to be here tonight just to kind of report on our progress and let you know where we are and let you know why we've come to the recommendation that we have. Our purpose tonight, our purpose throughout the year was simply to select a comprehensive learning management system for implementation in the 21-22 school year, as we said. First, let's just kind of put on the table, what is a learning management system? Most of us are familiar with components of a learning management system. Most of us have used similar systems to learning management systems, but we've never had a full and comprehensive learning management system in our district. The learning management system is an amazing tool when, for people, anybody like me who went to school more than before the advent of the internet, it's amazing to think what we would be here, that we would have software that would allow teachers to post their content, their homework, integrate apps from other parties like Google Apps and Discovery and BrainPop and all the tools that our teachers use on a regular basis. But allow for course content and curriculum to be posted online for students to access anywhere. The documentation for reporting student grades and progress, for the analysis of that performance data, analysis of really whatever data we choose to feed it. but most importantly, to aid, assist, and really help collaboration and communication, the most important pieces for our staff and our students and families. This is not something that we're picking because we are in, although the story is influenced by the last year, by the pandemic for sure. But this is a tool that would be amazing, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, and that we're going to need to select no matter how we go forth in the future. So I've posted some screenshots just to give people a relative idea of what a learning management system looks like. We're familiar with things like School Loop and Google Class, each of which have components that may be in a learning management system, but nothing like the comprehensive way that we're looking at it. Here you can see a picture of an elementary learning management system, classrooms, subjects, little cartoon animals. So in here you see a more secondary oriented learning management system page, what a student might see as they go home, areas to access their course content, side overdue items, upcoming items, things like that. Ways to access their grade reporting, their resources, things they need to connect to, posted content, all of those things that that's just necessary for any student's education today. We are here representing, as we said, a committee, and this is the really happy thing about tonight's report is that this was an incredibly collaborative effort. This committee had over 60 people, administrators, certificated, classified staff members, parents, students, all represented, all stakeholders represented. We spent a good 3 weeks in September making sure the committee was representative. Gladly, just a great collaborative effort with SRVUSD and CSEA to pick the committee members to ensure representation. Parents were chosen by the PTA, the ed funds. We had a lot of at-large interest, which we were able to select from. Administrators volunteered their time. And when we got to the evaluation phase, we took an extra step of inviting representatives from schools that may have been underrepresented, so that we made sure that we were representative of the entire district, especially for the final evaluation phase, which I'll share with you shortly. A little background and context. If we think back to the incredibly breakneck pace of the summer of 2020, we were looking around knowing we were going into a year full of uncertainties that was definitely going to be technologically based in some fashion, whether that was remote, hybrid, or we just didn't know. We were watching other districts around pick learning management systems and pick tools very quickly. And somehow we made a very wise decision to slow down and hold off on picking something that we didn't know about, that we needed to learn more about. And we chose to get through the year working with Google Classroom and Seesaw as learning platforms, not learning management systems, although there was certainly a lot of confusion at the time. And to every community member who touched one of those programs, their credit, they got through the year on those, and they certainly did their best to learn the tricks and the trades and reinvent themselves. And there's a lot of credit goes to everybody for wanting to do that. But we also had a recognition that this was something we were going to need in the future, a comprehensive learning management system, especially as we took the lessons of the pandemic, the way that we see education being transformed into the future. So we tasked that we would create a task force to select that comprehensive learning management system, that we would take the time to go through the process and do it right. We did also keep School Loop last year after a little bit of wrestling over it as a communication tool for parents and for students. This year we will be, we spent the year as a task force. We'll be making the recommendation. We'll be ready for implementation in fall of 2021, pending your approval, pending your recommendation. But very important to note that this is just the selection process. The training and the implementation is another heavy lift, as they say, that will begin as soon as we are able to purchase the product. A little bit of the timeline of the process that we went through. And in September, we spent selecting the committee. October, we built our vision and really spent the time with the committee refining our key criteria. There were 176 pieces of criteria that we got down to. And we posted the RFP in the request for proposal in December. We received 9 responses to that request for proposal in late December and January. Important to note, I think, for our community is that School Loop was not one of the companies that responded to our proposal despite working with. We're sure we'll get a lot of questions about why School Loop is not part of this discussion. They did not submit a proposal. We had a subcommittee of the larger committee, 15 people who whittled our selections down from 9 to 4 finalists. And January and February is where the large amount of the work is done. And thanks to Greg Pitzer and Jenny Hunau and Sarah Costa-Landry, we were able to put together 4 cycles of a 4-hour training, 2 weeks of evaluating the finalists in a sandbox format, and a question and answer session at the end of each of those 2-week cycles. We repeated that 4 times for people, and that's how we evaluated these 4 finalists. Again, that's an incredible amount of work for the committee members, for the teachers, for the staff, the parents, and the students. I just want to recognize that was a lot of work to be doing in an already difficult year, but they did it. And on March 16th, we had a lengthy 2-hour plus meeting where we selected and drilled down and looked at our evaluation data to get to this final recommendation. And I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the data we used to get to that point. Our goal in this was not to have a winner. Our goal was to build a consensus. These are tough choices that we have to make. It looked a lot like a textbook adoption process, if anybody's ever been with that, where you're down to a few choices and you have to say yes or no, or I want this one, I want that one. We just couldn't be prouder of our committee for working together, for being flexible and compromising and understanding when the will of the evident, that we were able to stay transparent, stay collaborative, and get to a decision as a group. We had decided that if a documentable consensus was not reached by the end of that final meeting, we would take a final vote and those numbers would stand. Luckily, we didn't get to that point and we were able to document our consensus. This was the initial evaluation data that was submitted after those 4 rounds of testing. Taken the names of the other 3 finalists off, but as you can see, the yellow bar indicates people's ranking of Schoology, which will be our recommendation tonight. As you can see, it was clearly the front runner for people's first choice, with very few people selecting it as a last choice, and in the middle, second and third choice. We did quantify those results in a ranked choice voting system, the elementary and the secondary, so the lower score here is good, it's golf scoring. You can see Schoology came first in all at both elementary and secondary levels. During the course of that 2-hour final meeting, we talked, and that was how we did it. We discussed and we gently debated our choices, and along the way, we took a few straw polls with the goal of being able to document, was a consensus building for this product. This is our mid-meeting straw poll where you can see elementary was clearly building towards a consensus for Schoology at 65% and 55% at the secondary choice. We had about 45 to 50 people at that last meeting, which is incredible retention for a committee that started at 60 during a year like that. The elementary, at the end of the dance, we had decided that we had reached a consensus by discussion. We took a final poll, and this was meant to document. We split this 2 ways. The first way was we polled amongst all 3 candidates. We had eliminated a 4th because it was clear it wasn't going to meet our needs. We polled between the top 3 candidates, and you can see amongst the top 3, only 2 were voted on, and Schoology was at an 85% people's choice rate. At the suggestion of one of our committee members, we took a poll between Schoology and finalist 2 and Schoology and finalist 3. So the poll on the left is between all, even though one didn't get any votes, and the other 2 are binary polls that we elected to see how they were doing head to head. Clearly, you can see Schoology was doing pretty well, especially in that second one where they won unanimously. We were then able to document that the elementary consensus was a recommendation to go with Schoology as a learning management system. On the secondary level, you can see that the choice amongst all 3, we did the polling the same way. We documented at 79% was the first choice for Schoology amongst all 3, with 88 and incredible 94% against the third finalist. So we were also similarly able to document that Schoology was the clear consensus recommendation for our secondary staff and students and parents and teachers as well. I'd like to tell you a little bit about why our committee felt that Schoology was the best product. Like I said, it met the most criteria out of the gate, 168 of the 176 criteria that we had set forth collaboratively. Our committee felt it had a user-friendly interface that required less training up front to get the most use out of it, that people felt that they would be able to use the most features with the least amount of training, if that settles. The grade books, and this was very important to our committee, able to accommodate both standards-based and traditional numeric grading methods. Content and course building was seen as seamless. Access to district and site level curriculum, integration with other apps that our teachers are used to using, that we're already using. Teachers able to create individual group assignments, communicate that, have meetings, discussion boards, post assignments, all of the wonderful things that we hope that we want out of a learning management system. Parents were very much in favor of Schoology as the choice. They felt they were easily able to view work submission, teacher feedback, upcoming assignments, and a piece that's been important to us over the last few years, we've certainly discussed with our current communication system, but able to control the settings of notifications easily. It interfaces with Google Apps, which I think honors the work that the teachers have done this year in learning Google Apps for education and learning all the of Google. This will integrate well with them, including Google Drive, which we're all familiar with. We did a fair amount of reference checking as well. Modesto Unified School District and Palo Alto Unified School District both highly recommended, said that the company followed through with what it said it would do. They didn't feel misled. We did follow through with reference checks on the other finalists, and we weren't satisfied that we got the same level of that feeling that people got what they were promised at the end of the day. So I've included some screenshots just for reference, just so people can see a little bit about what they'll start to see as we roll this out next fall. Here's a rubric grading of an essay. You can see what rubrics are available on it. Teachers can grade right on there, assess right on there. Here's a numeric-based grading system, or a numerical-based grade book, excuse me. Supports multiple grade formats. We know that we're working hard on different ways of grading, but we also know that traditional grading is very much a part of what we do. And we felt that this would be most accommodating to all of them. More mastery-based grade books, more standards-based grade books, which we have certainly people throughout the district working on. Course analytics, ways that administrators and staff can look at how kids are engaging with the platform. Are they spending time on it? Are they doing what they need to be doing with the Schoology system? So we just included those to give a little taste of what people might see. This just leads us to our final task force recommendation that we recommend the implementation of the Schoology learning management system for use at both the elementary and the secondary levels to begin at the 21-22 school year. As soon as we know from you your guidance and direction, we are ready to start putting together training and implementation, which is going to have to likewise be a collaborative effort, but we're ready to start that. The last thing, I just want to say again that this took a tremendous amount of work from the committee members. We couldn't be more grateful to those teachers who, during a year that's all just already been filled with twists and turns, were taking 8 hours, hours to train with us, to learn, to play with the sandbox formats. Just devoted, committed, flexible, compassionate at the end of the day. I'm really proud of the work of Jenny Hanau and Sarah Costellandri and Greg Pritzer, and just thankful for the amount of time they put in, and we hope you find our recommendation satisfactory. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Because I know you, of course, checked with, the current users, like you said, Modesto and Palo Alto. So in their feedback on like the customer service of Schoology, what do they think?
I think Jenny, was it Greg checked with Palo Alto and Modesto?
Yes, there was a third district, Fremont Union High School District, that actually is very similar to us. They use Infinite Campus, they use School Loop, we used to use those. They tested out one other platform for a year, did not like it. then moved to Schoology and been very pleased with that decision. I just think they had a lot of similar characteristics as far as what they were looking for as we did, and they also felt that I'm very supported by Schoology and what they need to implement versus the other platform they had selected.
Okay, great, thank you. And my other question was, because we're looking for this as like from now on, right? This to help us manage everything. So there might be some adjustments or changes or things like that. That they Schoology seem to be open to like maybe some customization for SRVUSD.
I think that is definitely possible. I can't promise without knowing exactly what kind of customizations down the line we're looking for. But Schoology is a platform that I've followed in my profession probably for the last 8 years. And so I've seen a lot of progress, a lot of change, obviously, over those 8 years, lots of new features being implemented as education has moved, especially more towards the standards-based grading, competency-based learning, those types of modalities. I think they're definitely open to our requests. And I think also being a fairly mid to large size district, we also will carry a little bit of a weight in what types of features they implement each year.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Ken?
Yeah, I guess tied into Susanna's question, is this pretty much off the shelf then, or is there a certain amount of organization that we even start out with? And the other side of that is, what does it take to maintain it over time from a district perspective?
So there are a couple of things that we looked on, as the committee was evaluating from an educational classroom instructional standpoint. The technology team also had kind of separate meetings with each of the companies, specifically looking at how it integrates with the current systems. And that's one thing Assistant Superintendent Hillman and I have been really looking at our systems and make sure that they collaborate with each other, that data is easily passed between the two of them. Schoology, I think, uses lots of several formats that will allow us to easily sync data between Infinite Campus and Schoology to keep things in sync with limited amount of work from the staff here. I won't say no work, but we feel that it would be relatively easy to implement compared to some of the other systems there. And as far as customization, I think there is opportunities to customize. I think that one thing that was nice is to be able to set up templates. So setting up the initial template may take a little bit of technology, a little bit back-end work. But once created, that template can be then shared easily to other teachers to use and replicate. So I think there is, on the back end, you can do a fair amount of customization. I think that was one of the other features we definitely liked on the technical side of the product.
Laura, you had a question?
Yeah. What will the onboarding look like for our staff in terms of implementation and training? And then are you expecting that they will be able to use it fully by the fall?
Can you repeat the first part of your question? What will the what look like?
I'm sorry. What will the onboarding look like? In terms of training for our staff and teachers? And then do you want me to ask the second question again?
I'll do that one first, if that's okay. The onboarding, this was really concentrated on the selection. Onboarding will be a significant amount of training. We don't want to underestimate that it's work to adapt, it's work to learn. We wanted to make this part of the goal of making the timeline meet and select by March, which we're barely under, but was to make sure that we had time to begin that training and onboarding in April and May. There's significant training options from the company, and we'll be doing that. Hopefully, the goal was really to get most of it done before the end of May, or really have people familiar, rolled out, know what we're getting into next year. So there's not a feeling. The last thing we want to do is add any more stress to anybody during this time. But we do know it's going to be some training and work don't know if you had anything to add on that.
Yeah, so it's a couple little things. Talking to Schoology in the last week or so, kind of finalizing the proposed contract. We will have an implementation team from Schoology working with us for the next probably 3 or 4 months. And for the month of April, we're working on getting the back end started and up and running, and starting to work with their trainers to look at a train-to-trainer model. The goal is by beginning of May to allow teachers to start to interact with the system, at least by the time they leave on June 1st, that they have the ability to get in and have some exposure to Schoology before the summer starts. And of course, there'll be tons of trainings that we'll be offering in May, summertime, in August, that Schoology will be assisting with us with that.
We also discussed making sure we have the level of support from them so that for at least the first year, that teachers were able to contact the site directly and get the help they needed when they needed it, at their convenience.
How or have you looked at how difficult or how easy it will be for a teacher that has their system set up in the Google Classroom in School Loop, have all of that curriculum, all of the information that they have in that software transferred over to Schoology?
I don't know. Jenny, do you want to give the answer to that from the classroom teacher perspective, or?
Thank you.
Or,
yeah, no
okay.
problem. It actually works really well with Google Classroom. That was one of the recommenders that I contacted. That was one of the selling points for them, was that it was really seamless. And so really you're just kind of uploading a document from Google into your Schoology platform. So it's really seamless. And that was one of the pros of the system, was just how easy it is to use right out of the box. Teachers, as they get training, are going to use really vast resources that it has, but for initially setting up a classroom, it's easier out of the box than some of the other ones that we tried.
Okay, and you, one last question. You there's the assumption that our teachers will have the time and the knowledge to be able to really use it effectively by the time fall rolls around.
I believe so, and I think that was, again, probably the biggest selling points, was that ease of use without that massive amount. I mean, it will take work, and I don't want to underestimate or understate that, but the feeling that teachers had that they would be able to use most of the features pretty intuitively and easily. Unless you have anything to add. That was just, if I recall reading the feedback that they'd given us in that initial evaluation, that's the one that stood out to me the most, was that feeling that they knew what they were looking at enough to say, I can use this without getting, going to get a degree in it, where they had that feeling with some of our other candidates.
I have one last question. Sorry, just
No problem.
because given this last year and all of the movement that had to happen around figuring out, how to work remotely and that type of thing. So looking into next year, I'm assuming that this will for us nimble if we have to be in terms of quarantining and that type of thing within the classroom space. Is that correct?
Yeah, I certainly think this would make that kind of, if we had to be nimble, it would help us. But if we have to be and when we have to be, which, flexibility is going to be part of it, I think this is having a more comprehensive system is going to allow that, you're not moving. So if I'm a teacher moving from, because we all had to go in quarantine or whatever, I'm not moving 3 of my products. Hopefully I'm only moving the 1. And it's all still in one place, and it's all still comprehensive. It's all still right there, rather than, we're doing 2 or 3 separate things at a separate time. So I think it would make that kind of flipping and nimbleness much easier to navigate. Heather, do you want to add anything?
I really just want to kind of pull out that Infinite Campus is really where that flexibility and all the course rostering takes place. That's really the crucial part when looking at how flexible the system is. What this does do is sync directly with Infinite Campus. So whenever we do make a change, hybrid to remote or any other system, it directly sync to Schoology, and rosters will change overnight directly. So it's a nice tight integration there.
Great, yeah, and really more and to that's great, but also in terms of that classroom management, if a specific class has to.
Right. If we have to quarantine for whatever reason or anything, yeah, it would be easier than it currently is, and teachers have made it work now to their credit. Absolutely, I think this just the idea of the more comprehensive, the more it's in one place, I think the easier it's going to.
Thank you.
Because we don't know what this future looks like. And
Lesson learned this year, right?
that was fun. But yeah, and I think having that kind of comprehension, that kind of comprehensiveness allows whatever it looks like. We may be spending more time at home or a blend, or we just don't know. And I think this will make it much simpler, personally.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple of public comments. Helen of the Valley on 10 point.
Hello. I want to speak on this item as 3 different roles I have had experience in. Number one, as a parent, I'm tired of you guys constantly bringing new systems, new different things. It's also really difficult for the parents to keep track and to monitor. And we also have other things to do. So I just think that, we're just coming out of this pandemic mess. Is this the right juncture in time to introduce to everyone? So that we can have something more on our plate. The second the second experience I want to speak is as a former teacher. I was a multi-subject teacher. I taught 2nd and 3rd grade, and I was a newbie in my 20s when I was a teacher. I never had much interaction with the union. I know I was part of the union because it was automatic or something like that. I see my pay stub every month gets deducted. I have never talked to a union representative. So I want to speak as a teacher, going back to my 20-year-old experience. Every time my principal comes with what the district wants the teachers to learn, we always have to spend a lot of time to learn. When I was in my 20s, I wasn't married, I didn't have my kids, I stayed on campus because I was a newbie every night until 8 p.m., sometimes 10 p.m. I only had 20 students. That's how much. As a responsible person, I was paid so little. Every month, it was barely $2,000 a month in my paycheck. It is pathetically cheap. I was a cheap laborer. However, my love is extremely rich for the 20 students I had. So I wonder if of all those 1,700 teachers we have in this district, there may be some teachers who are like me. Then by going through this, you're asking them to learn something again. Do they have 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock detail every night? Whether they're virtual, they can stay up behind their computer. I respect teachers all the same. I don't care if they're a physical teacher, if they're a virtual teacher. If they have the benevolence to teach, I respect them. Number 3, as a business person, I suspect somebody is getting kickbacks. I'm getting all these different new things. Is that why we're having a business bank account? Why are we going into this? Is it coming from the teachers or is it coming from the top, the politicians? I know our governor moved into a brand new house, all paid for, multi-million dollars. Who is getting paid in our district? There's no name, no company, no nothing. How much is this? There's not enough information. Please vote it down. And I know I'm wasting my time. We will pass it. Go ahead.
Okay, Laura Finko, also on comment on 10.2.
Thank you, trustees. I just wanted to take a moment to publicly thank Chris George and his team that led the LMS task force. Chris, you stayed in contact with all the stakeholders. You gave us updates, the teachers' updates. You made us part of the conversation and part of the process. And it really showed in terms of how working in this partnership and working with the collaborative efforts of everyone together that good stuff can come when you take the time to listen to the voices and work together for what will hopefully ultimately be great for our students. So again, thank you to you and your team. And I hope that you all do pass this systems change. I do believe that it will be a good integration for what we will be doing from here into our future. Thank you.
Or any more discussion or?
I just wanted to say that when I looked at the board packet and I saw that all of you come to this, I was so impressed with the depth and the realm, all of the detail work, all of the input we got from stakeholders. I think it was so thorough, and I think it's going to be a great step forward for all of our students and our families. I want to thank our teachers ahead of time for taking the time to support this and to do the training necessary so we can all make it.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that it was so much of that was borne by Jenny Hanau and Sarah Costel.
Actually, I love that the students were in on it too, right? They get to kind of test.
Yes, we did. We did use, not use. We did have students help us evaluate, especially in that for the 4 finalists, and we took a lot of input from them. That was again, and I've got to say it. That was teachers collecting students, and that took even more time than on top of that. So again, that was just teachers.
Okay. Great, thanks. Rachel, you have something.
I just wanted to say something similar to what Shelley said, that, you know, a little less than a year ago, the learning management system was a really hot topic in the district, especially after last spring. And there were lots of community members encouraging us, go buy this, go buy that, so-and-so uses this. And I really appreciate, first of all, the district's choice of going with Google Classroom and Seesaw and the heavy lift that our teachers had in making that work, knowing that it was probably going to change, but that everyone was investing in this year to come up with a system that would be done through a process like Chris described. And I really thought the report was thorough and excellent. And it was just great to hear that the consensus building process worked and that the all included. And you've come out with a recommendation that also got great references as well. So thank you to everyone on the team for bringing this recommendation forward. And just for context, we've had School Loop for a very long time. And I'm sure anyone who was around back then remembers there was a controversy about that because it didn't go through this kind of a system, kind of an evaluation process. So while it was new and it provided a lot of value, I'm looking forward to this really meeting our needs much better.
And just one piece to add, and thank you. We wanted to be clear that we recognize that not everybody got their first choice, but everybody came to the table. We did also take, just this afternoon, we had a meeting with those members of the committee that didn't feel that this was their first choice, and so that we could take input back to Schoology to say this is what our other committee members who didn't necessarily pull you for first wanted to see as well, and they've been receptive to that too. Thank you all.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Otherwise, can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt Schoology for the fall.
I second. The motion was made by Board Member Bratt and seconded by Board Member Clark. Call out vote. Board Member Clark. Aye. Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Great. We're on to 10.3, consideration of adoption of resolution 60/20-21, approval of provisional internship permit request.
Good evening, trustees. This item requests that you take action to approve resolution number 60. It essentially allows my department authorization to hire 2 teachers under what we call provisional internship permit, or PIPs. These are teachers who have bachelor's degrees. They've met the basic competency skills in reading and writing and mathematics. They're in the process of earning their credentials, but they have not yet earned subject matter competence, that they haven't passed CSET examinations or perhaps don't have a major in the subject, etc. The two individuals that we're looking to hire, one is a Spanish teacher who will split between Venture and Gale Range Middle School, and the other is a first grade teacher who we need to cover for the remainder of the year. Great help. Even though this is a fairly a routine item, the California Department of Education does require that we bring this to our Board of Education action item rather than that's the reason.
Thank you, Keith. Any questions from the board?
Move approval.
Second.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Mintz. Call out vote. Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Okay, 10.4, reopening 2021-2022. Dr. Malloy.
Thank you, President Ordway. I will start this presentation and then Assistant Superintendent will take over with many others who are assisting. Obviously, the planning for the fall is very much connected to the work that we've been doing with you, with our staff, and with our community this year. And needless to say, and I know you've heard me say it every single time we meet, this has been a challenging year for so many different reasons. But I think we're reaching a point where I'm hoping that we are providing the type of clarity that's necessary for our community to understand the direction we are heading in, for our staff to be engaged in the process, and for us to return to the extent possible, and I say that with as much sincerity as I can, to a sense of normalcy that we know many, if not all, of our students. So the first slide that you see here just speaks to a bit of the future, because we've started the discussion with you already. We're now beginning the engagement with our stakeholders, that we are really looking forward to the strategic directions that we would want for you to pass and approve in June, because it provides a foundation work that we're doing together. And I won't be going into much detail about this evening, and the team will offer some comments, but on that foundation of equity, that we create those conditions for all of our students to be successful and really challenge those barriers and that bias and those obstacles that might make that happen on a very specific commitment to social and emotional well-being, because we know that that's important any day, but it's actually even most important as we reflect on the challenges of this past year and we move towards the near future. And of course, our SRVUSD colleagues are also very much connected to that commitment, and I'm appreciating all of the messages that have been shared. And of course, our other union partners as well have shared with me personally how much social emotional well-being is key to the work that we do. And of course, deep learning and innovation, because the kind of world that we're living in, the challenges that exist, the important opportunities our kids have to learn on that standard of excellence that already exists here is something that we're so very much committed to. And we have been committed to that all year. But probably if we are putting it on the table, we've been so pulled in so many different directions. These things are not in our control. We've done our very best with the information that we have. And our goal and our hope is that from the district level, supporting our schools and our classrooms, that we're able to continue this important strategic work. Health and safety will remain our priority, and I need to emphasize that. There is one guiding principle that we have never broken, and that is that we follow the requirements, the guidance from our public health experts. I know that there are different interpretations that you've heard. There are different states with different ideas. There are different agencies with different research. And I understand there were days when personally I wished we were able to move in certain directions, but that guiding principle regarding what the state of California has allowed related to public health, we've never wavered. And I know that that has upset or affirmed or caused appreciation from our wonderfully engaged community, and yet that principle still stands. So what you're hearing tonight is based on that same guiding principle, that we follow the expertise of our state public health leaders. Before we go into the details of both the returned to school program, which your commitment is already clear, 5 days a week, full time. We understand that we cannot control the future and that 5 days a week in-person full-time option needs to have the ability to pivot. And I'm going to use that term purposefully, even if we've overused it, because we don't like pivoting anymore. But again, we don't have that control necessarily. But any pivoting we do in the plans that you're hearing cannot cause the kind of disruption that we've experienced this year, again, no fault of anyone's. We cannot change schedules. We cannot change teachers. We cannot continue to ask for declarations. It simply is not healthy from my perspective. So we are very much committed to that 5-day in-person model. We understand that model may need to pivot should circumstances shift. No, for smaller numbers of our students, there still may need to be a virtual option. But it's important for us to be clear tonight that the state has authority over what it allows. And what you're going to hear tonight is that we can find a very clear place in the education code where our virtual option can live. But please note that that virtual option intends to be very much like the virtual or remote option we have now. I share these things before I turn it over to the team because our goal tonight is to clarify our direction so that we can receive your approval. Obviously, whatever direction you wish to take us in is absolutely important. We need to continue to communicate effectively. We need to support and implement. One of the things that I think is probably the hardest experience I've had as a superintendent, sitting in the face of all of these significant, passionate, diverse views, is how hard it is to communicate support. How hard it is to build morale. How hard it is to move away from the winning and the losings and the this side and the that side when we're all united for our kids. And I believe that in the short time I've been in this community. So our goal is to support and implement. We will continue our commitment to negotiations where that is required, and we appreciate the collaboration that happens there. And we have a solid plan, and I hope that you will hear that this evening. I hope that you will be able to ask questions, as will our community in terms of public comment. We are grateful for all of the public comments we have received in writing. They are all being posted, and they are all part of the minutes, should they have arrived to us at the proper time, as the new direction states. But I do want people to know that everyone has been heard in the recommendation you are hearing this evening. So I will turn this over to our Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy, and good evening, trustees. Again, I want to emphasize, I think, 2 words that John shared as I dive a little bit deeper into the 5 areas that will continue planning for the fall of 2021. Unity and continuation. And I think throughout this presentation, I think you will see our teachers, our staff, all members of our community have come together into these 5 areas that you'll see tonight to really continue the work that we are doing into the fall of 2021. The first area being social and emotional well-being and planning. I want to take a moment tonight to really highlight some of the things that we are going to continue to do when we move into the fall of 2021. The 3 big areas you see here this evening, mental health supports, wellness, social emotional learning, mean many things that are up on this slide. But I want to highlight a few of the things that are on the ground happening and will continue to expand and grow into the fall of 2021. We plan on being intentional about the role of mindfulness in student learning, actively teaching students how to be mindful in the classroom. We plan on continuing to have support providers work with students on an individual basis and in a group basis. We have found this year the need more than ever for kids to have that connection with adults on campus. Third, we plan to explore opportunities to expand social and emotional well-being resources. And last, we want to provide resources not only for our students, but all of our district stakeholders to promote wellness. The second area that we're going to focus on as we move into the fall of 2021 is deep learning and instructional planning. Instruction is my favorite thing to talk about, And this year, we've had the opportunity to really grow. As we move into the fall of 2021, I really want to highlight some places where we have prepared. For the past month and even tomorrow, our second course of MTSS, Multiple Tiered Systems of Support, professional development will continue with our staff and administrators. I'm very proud of the work that our district director, Debbie Pettish, has led with a committee of stakeholders of teachers and administrators to support the deep learning and instruction for intervention. We'll continue to implement FastBridge. As our Assistant Director, Gregory Dran, shared earlier today, the importance of continuing to monitor student progress throughout the year is going to be key to our success in the fall of 2021. We're going to leverage tech tools and deep learning tasks that we've been able to implement this past year. We've learned a lot from the technology we've been able to implement and from the strategies we've been able to use during both synchronous and asynchronous learning time. The third area, equity. Equity, which is at the core of the work that we do. San Ramon Valley, as you know, is committed to providing access to opportunities to all students with equitable and academic, social, and emotional outcomes. As we move into the fall of 2021, we really want to place an emphasis on listening to those who have lived experiences within our community and truly listen to the ideas on how we need to improve. It will be key to developing a strong foundation of equity in San Ramon Valley. Fourth, we have health and safety of the utmost importance. For the fall of 2021, we want to continue to follow the guidance as Dr. Malloy shared. We want to make sure that students are masked. We're also exploring the uses of houses. Houses are a way in which we can group students together for their courses, which enables us to contract trace better and really enable us to understand which kids have been impacted if in the event we are having to look into a group. The fifth, and probably one of the most important things that we're going to talk about tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Instruction, is Chris George, to talk about our virtual academy planning going forward into fall of 2021.
And as Chris is coming to the microphone, I think that that last slide that Christine shared is really important. For those who are, obviously our plan is, and I think it's important for me to emphasize because it's different than last year. People are asking, where is the declaration? And that's not what we're proposing. We are not proposing a declaration at all. We're actually proposing that our students are coming back to school 5 days a week, full time, and that's what we plan for. However, in no way are we saying that that would be every family's choice. So the process that we are now going to hear is more about how that part will unfold. And we will be sure that not only tonight we'll be talking about this, but Chris will share other examples where we will engage parents. But some have written and said, if I want my child to be back at school, how will you do everything you can to ensure? And that last slide I'd like to emphasize, because people may not actually know what the house system is, for example. A house system is where we group students, especially where we can in secondary with common courses, for example. So the kids aren't just with the same class, obviously, because it doesn't work like that in secondary, as we know. But we do our very best to work the schedules so that where possible, especially in 9th and 10th, of course, middle school, this is quite easy when it comes to core. We try to work the schedule so that kids are with each other, maybe in a group of 100, for example. So there's multiple classes. It's not like elementary, but it would allow for us to provide that kind of safe opportunity, regardless of what might come. As you know, it's a lot easier in elementary because we do have our specializations, and I know that that becomes something for us to consider, but our kids are oftentimes in stable cohorts in elementary, and that's a little bit easier for people to get their heads around. So I wanted you to know that we are thinking really specifically around how to plan for any eventuality to the best of our ability with everything we've learned this year. So just a few other thoughts before I turn it now back to you, Chris, for the virtual academy.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy, and thank you, Assistant Superintendent Hardo. It is my pleasure tonight to introduce our virtual academy and talk about the planning and our plans for the fall of 2021. This is a new idea, but it's in some sense, but it's not a new idea in the sense that it's Assistant Superintendent Guajardo said, it's about continuation. At the end of all this presentation and all the things we're going to present about a virtual academy, what we want you to take away is just the idea, the vision of, we all know what a full day of remote learning looks like after this day. We know that for some students, that's where they will need or would like to continue, and it will look very, very much like remote learning did this year. And if there's no other takeaway from talking about the Virtual Academy tonight, it's that students will be engaged in a program that looks very much like remote learning does this year. The purpose of a virtual academy and the reason for us planning for one is that while we've said often, and while the board has said often, that we do believe that students are best served in an in-person environment. We have seen the joy in their faces in getting back. We have seen, we know that we have such great teachers that want to be in the room with the students. But we also recognize that this pandemic is unlike anything we've ever seen, that there is uncertainty ahead, and there's uncertainty for, that will stretch into the next school year. We know that some families may need to or choose to continue in a remote learning environment. We'll talk about what kind of student this is a best fit for, but we know that some families may want to continue in a remote environment. And as we said, we want to be able to provide that option for students. We want to support students for whom that's the best option. The Virtual Academy will allow students from kindergarten through 12th grade to continue in a remote setting. The Virtual Academy is geared towards students from kindergarten through 12th grade who have a medical need or unique medical circumstances which prevent them from attending in-person learning in the 2021-2022 school year. It's also for students who have really truly thrived in a remote environment. We know there are kids out there for whom this has been a great thing. We don't have a number or quantify that, but we know there are students for whom remote learning has been a very, very effective learning environment, and we want to make sure that that option is respected. We also recognize that due to the uncertainties, some families may just choose to keep their students in a remote environment until this is all passed, until kids are vaccinated, whatever their choice is, and we respect and honor that. At the bottom line, though, we want to know that all families are welcome to choose the virtual option. All families are welcome in the Virtual Academy and will be supported when they attend the Virtual Academy. We will be housing the Virtual Academy under the umbrella of the alternative education programs, as Dr. Malloy alluded to earlier. We have currently Venture Independent Study and Del Amigo Continuation School as our part of our alternative program. The Virtual Academy will be housed under the alternative education umbrella, but is separate from those programs. We will be using some of the same infrastructure as Venture, and we'll explain that as we get to enrollment, but the program and the educational model will be a different thing. As we said, as Dr. Malloy said, this California State Legislature, from our information, this is their #1 topic right now. They are wrestling with is what are the requirements amongst distance learning. We're also aware that that guidance could stretch well into summer before we get clear guidance from the California State Legislature, the Department of Education. As Dr. Moy again alluded to earlier, we are able now to use the independent study ed code to do what we need to do for our students for the Virtual Academy. Create a program which is remote learning as it is now, continued into next year, using that independent study guidance, the independent study ed code. And that's the reason that this is housed with alternative education and alongside independent study, although separate. This second part is a really important part as we're in the infancy of planning this. The program is dependent on the interest level of our families. We'll be talking about program options later and what we may or may not to expand to, but it's really important to understand that we need to gather the information from our families about who may need to attend a virtual option, a virtual academy, who may choose to, so that we can really plan and define better. The two are going to go hand in hand throughout the summer of knowing what families want and being able to be clear about what it is we can provide. There is just, to put it clearly, there's just a huge difference between planning a program that maybe 30 people want or planning a program that maybe 3,000 people want. And the reality of the situation is right now we don't know what those numbers look like until we hear from our families. Once we know that, we will be clarifying our definition, our program throughout the summer, throughout the spring and the summer. This third part, just as we discussed often, how important the homeschool social emotional connection is going to be for students who remain in a remote setting. It's going to be, if anything, more important for our students who remain remote than it has been this year, than it is for students who are able to return back to in-person learning. We are very invested in their well-being and their homeschool connection, and we want to maintain that in any way we can. Students will remain involved in their home school, their school of attendance, their area school of attendance, excuse me. They will be able to attend school activities, extracurricular activities, after-school sports. A student who lives in the Monte Vista attendance area can go to their prom, can go to their homecoming, can play football, basketball, volleyball, water polo for Monte Vista. A student who lives down by Boone Acres can go to Pineville School dances and play after school Pine Valley and be in their extracurricular clubs. We just want it to be known that we will be mindful of that homeschool. It's hugely important to us as it will be these students going into next year. The special education program related services will be likewise provided for and provided remote while kids are a student at the virtual academy. In depth a little bit later. But as we said before, we have to be mindful of the legislative requirements going forward. We have found the way that we're going to do that through the independent study guidance, but we also know that we have to remain nimble and make adjustments as we're planning for the fall. Just real quick, we want to point out that because there's been a little bit of confusion in our community, we want to be clear that the virtual academy is different from an independent study program, even though we will be using some of the infrastructure from the venture independent study program. To be clear, again, at the end of the day, the virtual academy looks like remote learning has for so many of our students this year. Independent study is great and devoted teachers at Venture working in small doses, an hour at a time, 2 hours at a time, in a small group blended environment, perhaps at Venture. And then students are largely working independently for the majority of their instructional time throughout the week. The virtual academy, students meet with the teacher daily. They are part of the class. They meet on a schedule. They go to periods just like they do this year, and throughout the day. It is not in work. It is work done under the guidance of a teacher, just as if they were in person. Special education programs and services, as we said, we will be fully supporting all students who wish to attend the virtual academy. Students with an IEP who wish to attend the virtual academy should enroll or should apply for a transfer in the same way that we'll describe later as every other student. And if they submit their transfer request by the design date, then they will be considered. They will and accommodated and met, and their needs will be met in the virtual academy. IEP meetings will be held for students with an IEP who apply to the virtual academy. We just need to take those extra steps to make sure that we are providing that free and appropriate public education, that FAPE for every student. But once at the virtual academy, students will receive all related services remotely. Their resource program, the special day class will be provided at all levels. And this is again for all students kindergarten through 12th grade. A little bit about the academic program and what people can expect, what our students can expect. Students will be enrolled in the virtual academy. They are students of the virtual academy. They will apply via intra-district transfer process, which again, we'll talk about. We are not able at this time to do concurrent enrollments between the virtual academy and other San Ramon Valley Unified School Districts, although they will be able, again, to do the school activities and sports like that. Students in elementary school, K through 5, will receive their regular academic program, just like it is now, math, reading, etc. Regular school day. Grades 6 through 12 students will receive core academic subjects and choose from a limited number of electives. We are emphasizing that point about electives because, again, as we spoke earlier, this is really numbers dependent. We will be providing a base. The goal is to make sure that we are providing for graduation requirements and A through G requirements. That's the goal for high school and for secondary right now, as well as provide as many electives as we are able to. But again, it will be numbers dependent, and we'll be able to update you as the semester goes on. All classes will be taught by credentialed teachers employed by the San Ramon Valley Unified School District. Our teachers will be, teaching remotely as they are now. Again, we keep going back to that continuation idea. And the school day hopefully will be scheduled as similarly as possible to this year's remote learning schedule. Obviously, we have a little bit of work to flesh out details on schedules. We want to make sure, again, keeping disruption to minimums, scheduling as similarly as we can. The elementary program recommendations is that students will receive the following subjects in their remote environment: reading, writing, math, and social studies with their home teacher, with their homeroom teacher, science and physical education with a specialist, and we are committed to providing music in grades 4 and 5. Again, this is exactly how things are now for remote students and for in-person students, just delivered remotely. Secondary course recommendations, if you see the column on middle school, you can see that middle school students receive their core, English and social studies, and for 6th graders, that adds that reading component. Math, course 1, 2, 3, algebra, geometry, in limited cases going up to geometry, science 6, 7, 8. A complement of electives, again, numbers dependent, but committed to having a world language option and elective options. And that PE delivered remotely as we've done it this year for many, many students. 9th through 12th grade, again, where we are now, and this part's fairly important, where we are now is committed to providing graduation requirements and A through G requirements. Expansion of that will require, subject to staffing and availability, committed to the same course, that same graduation requirement course load: English 9 through 12, world geography through economics and government, biology, chemistry, physics, complement of electives, that PE 9 and the PE elective. Again, offering the world language elective. We do want to give kids what they want as much as choice will allow, but the goal is providing graduation and A through G requirements. The enrollment process. So for families for whom this is a viable option or the option that they would like for the fall of 2021 for whatever reason, we will be doing this through the intra-district transfer request process. Those forms can be found, they will need to fill out an intra-district transfer form. Those forms can be found at the district website under transfers within the SRVUSD. That window opens tomorrow, March 31st, and we will need those transfer applications in by no later than April 20th, and we'll talk about that date in just a minute. Students who wish to, so we'll need that by April 20th. We'll talk about that date in such a minute. We know the question is going to come up about parents who may wish to want to know what happens if I decide I want to go back to an in-person environment. And that's a huge question for families, and we recognize that. We are strongly encouraging families to enroll for the year and for the semester at least. If a student wishes to return to their home school, their in-person environment at their home school at the semester, we will prioritize making sure that they get back to their home school, to the school that they live in the attendance area. If they choose to go back at any point midstream of a semester, we will find them a place during the district, at the available space within the district. Obviously, we would make every effort to return that student to that home school, but at the semester, we will prioritize that return to the home school. So, like I said, we do need transfer requests in by April 20th, and we recognize that that's 3 weeks, which is not a huge amount of time, but it is 3 weeks from today, roughly. And so why is that deadline? And like I said earlier, so much of this and so much of the planning here is dependent on what we need, on what we know about what our families want and need, what our students want and need. We have contractual obligations that we need to meet for our staff to make sure that our staff is taken care of, to make sure that we're staffing both the virtual academy program, but also if that staffing the virtual academy should impact other sites, any other 36 sites that are in our district, we need to know that as well. And with staffing a virtual academy program, we'll have a little bit of a ripple effect, and that will affect people. And we want to make sure that those people have ample time to prepare. And that ample time to prepare really boils down to ample time for students, to make sure that people have the time they need to get ready for next year, again, especially in this environment that we're in, We want to make sure that they have that time and to best prepare. So we are asking that the deadline is April 20th. The next steps for the virtual academy, that parents may have many, many, many questions. Those that are considering this, those that need to know more. We will be holding a virtual academy parent information night, April 12th at 5 o'clock. Please keep in mind that this is the day after we return from spring break. We are aware of that fact. We are working with time the best we can, as are so many of our families, and we want to have this night as soon as we can to get you to allow you the most time to be able to sit with the information, to have the information, to be able to make the best decision for you and your family. We will be posting a frequently asked questions section on our website, hopefully by the end of this week. 2 places that you may go for support or questions with the Virtual Academy. If you have questions about the transfer process itself, filling out the paperwork, am I filling out the right form, when will I hear back? That's going to go through Sandy Catarusa in our Student Services office. And if you have questions about the Virtual Academy program, please contact our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Deb Pettis. That's the information we have right now. We are looking forward to providing this opportunity for students. And I'll hand it back to Assistant Superintendent Fajardo.
Thank you, Mr. George. I just did want to make one clarifying point as to why we are offering this kindergarten through 12th grade. The reason we are not offering this for transitional kindergarten is we really firmly believe that the foundation of transitional kindergarten is about social emotional play. It's about being in person. It's about learning to interact with your peers. It's about learning to be on the carpet, be a student, building stamina. So we really felt it was important that as many of our TK students that we could get in person would come to school. As a reminder, TK is a program. It is for students who wish to participate in it. So it is not mandatory that children attend transitional kindergarten. And I will invite our executive director of elementary education up just in the event there are questions around why transitional kindergarten was not a part of our virtual academy offerings.
And I'll just close then by saying, in summary, thanks to all of our team for engaging in this work. We are hoping that the majority of our students can return to school in person. But that doesn't mean anything except for those who must remain remote, we will be providing an effective program. I hope we've been able to communicate why it is unsustainable to operate 36 remote and in-person programs. It has all kinds of challenges related to staffing, related to the use of resources, and frankly, it's just spreading all of us so very thin. And that's not sustainable. But I hope you've heard that we understand the importance of the connection to the home community. Even though it will have its operational challenges, we understand that families have been really clear that they don't necessarily want to make that commitment for the entire year, and they would hope students back to school in person, but they're not ready for various personal reasons to do that yet, which is why we built in that return at the semester and working through the operations around that. And with, as we've said, ensuring to our best that we can get students back to their home school. The next year is no problem. So there's been a lot of concerns about giving up one spot. You're not giving up one spot. If you're coming back the following year, then by all means, that's your school. It never wasn't your school. It's just that a circumstance that we know you need for a period of time. For those who are coming back to school, we will continue to follow the public guidance as I suggested. We will put into place some of those structures which will help us with cohorting. And of course, we will continue to negotiate and consult with our union partners regarding all of this. And as we say, the closing message, because there was confusion, please note that the program for virtual is intended to be like the program now. When I say that, I mean, I want to say exactly like, but if I'm misquoted, I don't want people to feel upset about it because we still have things we probably need to massage. Frankly, we've probably learned some things that we would all want to see added from the lessons learned this year. But for the most part, that is the plan with this. And my last comment, because I know that at least this time, for those who wish to choose the remote option, and they have some points where they could make a shift, like at the semester break. I know that sometimes we may not be clear enough about why we need time to move our system. And we have, let's start with the most important point. For us to be ready for August, in what we mean by ready, our teachers know who their kids are, our classified staff know who they are supporting and their roles. We're clear about what the expectations are. We've given enough time for any consultation and negotiation and real collaboration, which we have not been able to do to the extent I would like. And we have a path. This time we're saying that we provide that which everyone has already experienced. So though that window is small and I understand it and I wish we could do something about it, when we don't live within certain timeframes and it pushes out further, there are other implications for that. And that's why I'm trying to communicate with the greatest amount of understanding to how hard a decision like this is for those who are struggling to make it. But I'm also hoping that you've heard from us that we have looked under every stone, actually pushed that date out as far as we could, because this has to happen first so we know how to staff our schools. We don't obviously staff our schools and then find that in a particular school, 60 students don't plan to be there. Well, that has a huge impact that has to come first before we then move to the next step. So we are available for all of your questions. I know it's a lot of information, and I'm grateful to the team that they're going to be offering the parent evening, and we're going to have the frequently asked questions sheet, and will be available to work with our principals so that our school, our community can call our principals who will be able to speak to some of these things. Thank you so much. President Ordway, I'll turn this back to you.
Thank you. Board. At this time?
Oh. Can't tell. I have questions, but I also would like to hear the public comment cards. Or so, Laura, if you have questions you want to ask now, maybe.
So one of the things, one of the things that I heard in my, in the emails and public comment or emails and conversations that I had was a need to understand the risk of being in person in the fall for those that don't feel safe today and in person, and that's why they're one of the reasons why they chose remote. So let's say if there's a community spread that happens like what we saw in November of this last year, that happens in November of next year, will that move our in-person, full in-person back into remote? Is there going to be that assumption that there will be a point, a level, a line that once we cross, we move back into remote? Or once we're in full person and we keep to that 3 feet distance, and as long as we're not in the classroom having, in the building having surges, having outbreaks, that we will still continue to stay in person regardless of what is happening in the community outside of the school building?
So I'll answer that question because it's pretty much connected to the lessons learned this year. 2 different things happened this year. Sometimes the state or the county would clarify expectations, and they would clearly state what we must do in relationship to whatever tier we might be in. Other times, and this is what became confusing, they gave you as the board the authority to make certain decisions. And so to answer your question, this is our senior staff thinking on the model. If we basically know, even if we think about the first semester, who is wanting their children back in person and who really would like a little bit more time in remote. That's why we kind of did first semester, second semester. If anything were to spike, we would, as I said, follow the guidance. So the whole in-person model might have to move into hybrid if it's a physical distancing issue, or the whole in-person model might have to move into remote if it's actually greater than that. and then we'd have to move. Now, again, the thought of all of that, I know, is one I want to state with whoever is listening with a lot of compassion, because that's not simple. But what we want to avoid is, moving back and forth in any way that disrupts teachers, staff members, their relationships with kids, and the continuity of learning to the best we can, which I don't ever want us to have to do again, which is what we experienced in January, which, by the way, allowed us to do what we're doing now, even though it was quite difficult then. So the model is intended to be able to pivot as required. But to answer the question, sometimes it will be directed elsewhere, and sometimes it will be your decision, and I won't be able to predict that. I simply hope that we don't have to go there at all, but I appreciate the question. It's possible.
Yeah, and I think that the point is that I think it's important for families who don't want to have all the upheaval, who are seeing the risk of doing the full in person in the fall as a risk of further transition. What the lines are, what will trigger those things, and you've answered that in that it's based on guidance, and we don't have control over COVID, which we all know. Sorry, I'm not talking to the mic. We don't have control over COVID, which we all know. But at the same time, I think it's, just as a parent and as a student, it's important to just have some idea of what the future holds in terms of how the school district will respond.
And if I can add one other piece, which I think is really important to be clear about. Chris made this comment a few times, that we do need to hear from our families so that we can plan. And what our families tell us impacts what we can offer. And one of the concerns I had, because I know that most of the people who are considering remote for very valid personal reasons who wrote to us said they didn't want to necessarily commit for the year, but they certainly wanted to commit for the semester. But our challenge is, and not all of our families know this, is that others might require some of what our structure has allowed. So let me be clear of what I mean. What happens if 90% of the kids want to come out of virtual at the semester break and come back to school? We can work through that. We'll talk to negotiate with our union partners what that might mean. And I know that that's some heavy lifting we have to do. But it may not leave that many students in that particular program. We don't have control over that. And that may mean that there would be some shifts that we can't at this point predict. So again, that is why, as much as I'm being very careful how I say it, the reason why the model of coming back in person safely is the model that we're putting forward is we know exactly how to staff and operationalize that. We know exactly how to pivot, sadly, because we've done it, as required. And we want to offer this other piece because it's important. But we can't control all aspects of it. And I hope I'm being clear that those are things that our families need to consider as they're making this decision.
Yeah, and it's important to understand that there is risk in whatever you as a student, as a parent choose, because there are things, like you said, that it's COVID, it's out of our control, and so therefore we have to move and shift. Another question that kind of came across my desk was this idea of, and you mentioned it, at the 6 feet versus the 3 feet in the adult to adult and adult to student distance is 6 feet, and student to student is 3 feet. But we have students who are adults. We have 18-year-olds. We have transitional Del Amigo students. Where do they fit into that equation? I know this isn't about the remote academy, but where do they fall into the equation in terms of the 3 and 6 feet?
So once again, I'll answer that only because these are questions that I know more about, and then we'll have our amazing Ed Services team ask the other pieces. Because the students who are in our adult program are also students that have special education needs, we are following very significant public health guidance regarding what kind of support our staff needs in terms of the PPE that is required, as well as how to figure out there is enough space. And that is something that we're being very deliberate about in light of the learning that we had in the fall when that wasn't the requirement and we realized it needed to be. So that's what we're doing in terms of the adults in that particular program.
And then for the general ed 18-year-olds, the seniors who are 18, if they're just students, they're
With
not
that,
18.
I mean, this is where I think that the guidance doesn't get that precise. I mean, we're talking about high school being till 12th grade, and then we have adults in our programs afterwards, and we're making the distinction there. And again, I understand that this is where the science and the requirements, sometimes as we think through them, might not always make sense, but we're kind of considering it high school, and then our adult program would be the next step.
Yeah, and just a note too that they've opened up for in Contra Costa County for 16-year-olds and up for the vaccination. So hopefully that'll help alleviate some of the concern that some of our community has around that adult student issue. One thought that with the virtual academy, in terms of the like specific programming that happens when we look at like a leadership class in secondary or AVID, or we look at the GATE programming at the school sites, will those programming programs live within the virtual academy, or will they live back at the school site for those students in terms of having those opportunities and those types of programs?
In general, so as we said, to get back to the overarching point, the electives and programs that we would be able to offer for electives is going to be dependent on a lot about numbers and staff. For the most part, those programs are going to be kept at the sites. And as of now, again, the virtual academy is really being targeted to meet those graduation requirements and the A through G requirements, and a limited number of electives. To be clear.
So then let's say that a 10th grader who has been in leadership and they want to continue into leadership, but they're choosing to do the virtual academy next year, could they still continue in leadership at, let's say, at Cal? Or would they have to take that year off of leadership in order to
be honest, most likely they wouldn't be able to enroll in the leadership class, but we would encourage, again, emphasizing that homeschool connection. We would encourage that any way they could be connected. I mean, Lord knows leadership has a lot of after school parts and extracurricular parts. We would just encourage schools to really keep kids connected in any way that they could outside of that.
That makes sense. Thank you. I think that's it for now. Sorry.
What, one clarifying, I think I'm jumping in because it's kind of, I think you've answered it when you answered Laura's question, but I noticed that on the chart of the different grades and different classes, that the math area, A through G, I know high school graduation requirements up to Algebra 2, but I guess if there are need, and depending on students, the number of students and families interested, that like pre-calc, the higher levels, that would be dependent, right, on the staffing.
So let me add a part that I probably should have put in when we said this. Right now, it's really important that we are committing to only what we know that we can do with that, to the level that our students are accustomed to the level that we know our students need. So as of right now, we're merely saying we are committed to these graduation requirements. We are committed to those A through G pieces. We are committed to that level of what students would need as remote students to, to graduate as a student here. We are being very cautious to not overpromise and not overextend. And I think as far as the specific course offerings, including the math up to Algebra 2, at this point, I think it's only fair to say that we're only committing graduation requirements to make sure that what we promise we can deliver on.
Okay, thank you.
And I would kind of throw out that idea too of leveraging PLI in those situations, and especially for the high schoolers and that those opportunities that DVC provides in terms of online classes and that type of thing.
We will be examining how that fits into all of it as we kind of get clarity on numbers and get closer.
And I think, though, that the piece I appreciate about your questions as you probe what's at least on the table, as you determine what you wish to decide, I want to emphasize the challenge that we've experienced this year of overpromising and not being able to deliver. Part of what we're needing to do here is to do our very best to provide safety and effective learning, but not every possible variable, because it's not sustainable. And when we thought about this, it is true that the older you get in high school and the more specialized your choices, this does become more challenging. We'll do our very best to be responsive, but as I say, we really we don't want to overpromise in a way that then people are very disappointed in what it is that transpires later, which is why I appreciate the questions where you're at least probing what we've been working hard on. And again, we've learned a lot this year. And it doesn't mean that there aren't other ideas that could emerge. And by all means, to Chris's about, we really want to be very creative. We want to engage our staff and our administrators to figure out how can we support that connection, for example, even if it's not the same as being in the leadership class, because that particular family might need for there to be a remote option. But I think that that's part of what we're grappling with as we bring this forward to you tonight.
Yeah, on that same topic, I think it's really important how we communicate this to families that would be considering this as an option. Because what I'm hearing, though, is electives, in many ways, are off the table. You know, if you're a band student, there doesn't appear to be a band option if you want to be a remote student, for instance, or pretty much all of our electives. And while that might be what we're putting on the table, I think it's going to be really, really important for families to understand that, because if you have a student that is heading in a particular direction that and involves those electives, that's not going to be the program for you to be able to stay remote, given what we know right now. Again.
Down the road, we would love to explore with our staff and our colleagues how these options can be creative for the near future. So this whole concept of what have we learned this year that should continue to be considered is on the table. What we're saying to you, though, is we can't keep that on the table at the moment because we're trying to still manage the pandemic COVID reaction. To your point, Trustee Mins, we can't offer those things. The however is, again, and Trustee Bratt just mentioned it, because of how the vaccination process is working in our state right now, because of the openness very soon for 16-year-olds and older to be vaccinated, then we have another opportunity, especially for our older ones, where some of those special electives may be harder to provide at a setting like this. Again, it's not for every family, and I'm not asking families what decisions they should make. But these are all the factors families need to weigh when making their decisions. And thank you for the question.
Yeah, because I recognize that already the emails that we've been receiving are coming from families who are feeling pressured in terms of having to make a decision now without having these kind of things worked out. So again, I think it's going to be imperative that we're very clear in our communication about what this program is and is not, which is going to create some stir for folks, but I think it's going to be very important for them to understand now what is not on the table as well as what is.
The thing that I'm really struggling with, and first of all, I appreciate the presentation and the amount of work that went into it. I'm in favor of the idea that you can't do it at every school site. But the piece that seems like it's missing is the initial ask of where do you think, because you don't know if it's 30 students, 3,000 students, or what if it's 10,000 or 20,000 students. And so that's the part that isn't sitting well with me. We can communicate as clearly as you have about what you're promising. But if you're a medically fragile student who can't come back, but you're a math whiz and a computer science whiz and you're a junior or a senior, you're sitting here going with, you're not offering me a choice. You're offering me, I can't get the academic program that I need, or I'm risking health. I don't think we mean to be like that, but I just think there's got to be a way to first assess where do you sit, and then the even more nuanced questions in there about where do you sit assuming vaccinations are in place, because it sounds like the 16 and up is going to happen. I was reading today, it might even sound like the 12 and up might happen. I mean, I think it's easier if you've got a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, and there you can say, okay, I'm committing to online for the year. It's been great. That's where I want to stay. But so much of the mail we've received are from the people who were like, vaccination is a deal changer. And I really also don't see how at the semester we can do what you were proposing without huge disruption. Certainly teacher change and all that, unless we're somehow putting kids in these remote programs based by attendance area or what school they might end up with if they move. Or, I mean, I know it's hugely complex, but I think we need to have the scale of it before we're asking people.
I'm hearing two different things. Students who are medically fragile, for whom an option of vaccination may not provide the type of safety that's required, is something that may not be, I don't know, as large in number. We can do all kinds of things when we're talking about the one-to-one support for very specific circumstances. I always say that the 5% rule on not being a bureaucracy is you actually make exceptions when it makes sense, and it doesn't cause this avalanche of I want that too, because then the system can't actually meet it. So we're always willing to hear from those families. We might make our connections to our college system, for instance, because I've been in touch with the chancellor, for example. There are options through PLIs if we need to work down that road. There are things that we might be able to do with some of our own staff that are creative, like we've done this year, and we can certainly discuss those with our partners. That's something that we can do when we're talking about individuals who have a need. But for a system, the district, I mean, the state hasn't even come out to say if districts have to do this, and many are already saying they're not. And then if we hear that we can in June or July, then what does that do for the other opportunities around getting settled and getting people kind of understanding what they need? But this is the dilemma that you're facing. And I wish I could say something that would say, and here's the answer. In terms of how we would deal with a change in January for those who chose the virtual academy, again, I'll predict based upon this year, if vaccinations have happened like we've been hearing, and if the numbers continue to go down like they've been, my sense would be, I don't know it again, but my sense this year would be that a majority of those families might want to return at that January break, and then we'd have to be creative again with whatever number felt that that wasn't possible. And yes, is it a little bit of an operational nightmare? Yes. But we thought that if we came to you tonight and said families had to choose in the month of April by the 20th for the whole next school year, I don't think that that would be something we can put on the table for you. Do we still need the time to figure out how we're going to do that in terms of a transition, work with our colleagues and such? Yes. But at least if we know that that's the plan, what I'm trying also to avoid is all this reactive, running to changed information, not knowing exactly what the next step would be. So if we know that this is the plan, we'll start working on what January could look like as soon as we figure out who's actually wanting it in the first place. When we find out who wants it in the first place, we'll absolutely get a sense of who those kids are and what we might need to do in order to make it the most palatable experience possible. But what we're also trying to communicate is there's got to be limits, because we simply can't do it all. Or we're back to what we've committed to this year, which is a remote program and an in-person program that we held up in a certain way at all 36 sites, which of course you've already heard me say why that's so challenging. So you're naming the last month of our team's stress. But I hope we're providing some confidence that we really thought through each piece. We have a lot more collaborating to do, but that doesn't mean families the information they need to choose. We just need more collaboration time regarding some of the operational pieces that you've described.
And it kind of seems like maybe what we need to look at really what your risk tolerance is with regard to COVID. And assuming all the adults on the campus are vaccinated, and by September or by August, most of the 16-year-old and older are, because that sounds like it's doable from what they're projecting. Do I trust the 3-foot piece and all of that, and that we'll clean, and that we'll change the filters, and you know, all the layering of protections that we are doing, but people need the confidence, I think, that we are doing. And then I can have a pretty normal school experience. And I think the challenge for them is to trust us, right? And then there's the other situation of, you know, special circumstances in our home, and then we need to choose the remote. But we're really not trying to make the remote perhaps as attractive. And just kind of summing up where I think, because you're saying we have to build a system. And I know that is probably really, really hard for many families to kind of stomach right now, because this year they have been the 70% majority. And I think that's why we're, you know, receiving the email that we are, people who are really afraid and distraught and saying, you're asking me to choose things that I really can't know. But maybe part of it is if you have those needs, you need to put the transfer request in. And then if there is a lot of interest, bigger program to build. And then the reassurances too, that your home school, you'll still be able to return to your home school, certainly the following year, right? Because there were a lot of questions about that. And what about families where their home school is not their home school based on their address, but it's their home school because of existing transfer or a special program like Focus? What have we thought about that?
The commitment would be that they would return to whatever school is what they describe as their
Okay,
school.
so they can hang on to that. I think that's a very helpful reassurance for
Yes,
some.
we can plan for that.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, I need to go back to the first part of Rachel's question. It had to do with consideration before some kind of commitment. As mentioned, you know, we have like 70% of our students who are currently remote. And at the high school level, I believe they've already been selecting schedules for next year. So families going to need to take all of that into account, but we have no idea at the moment, because we haven't asked even where people are leaning, if we're going to have 70% of our families that are going to be interested in staying remote or not. I suspect not. My hope is that we're talking about a smaller percent. But if we were talking about even 10% currently remote and wondering if they're going to stay remote or not, it's a different story than the vast majority of our families. Asking that question, having to recognize that it's going to mean a change in schedules and things of that nature that they've already committed to. And based upon the solution or the results of what comes out of the transfer process, I'm concerned that we'd be going back to families and saying, well, yeah, I know we asked you for this. However, we're going to have to take a step back because of other things outside of their control. There's a way that we could get some kind of even a survey first before we ask them for a commitment.
So I'm going to explain why that just
No, I
causes
understand.
operational challenges. Everything you just said about kids choosing their schedule isn't commitment yet. We can't do anything with that yet. So the question is whether there are small numbers or large numbers, it will impact what we do with those schedules. When we look at this year's hybrid program or remote program, some made it very clear to us that they chose what they chose because of the medical concerns or the COVID concerns and such. Some were clear that they chose what they chose because they did not appreciate the hybrid model. And then some, of course, wanted to come back no matter what. So I really don't know, to be frank, what a survey would tell us, except it's something that then would, whether we have 20% who want the virtual academy or 50%, we still have to get to work. And so this is the signal to say, because again, what happens if we do the survey and then 3 weeks later, all of that data isn't going to work anymore because people have changed their mind because it's not something that leads to a commitment. And so it pushes us further into the summer and starts to impact those other pieces. So what we're asking for is we need to get the wheels moving. The choice for those who believe they must be remote is clear in terms of the type of schedule we are considering. The numbers, we're a bigger district. So this is where bigger is actually helping us. Smaller districts are not able to consider this, frankly, at all, and are looking at independent study models because they can't actually think about if they're going to have enough first graders across their 5 schools. Our 22 schools probably will provide us enough first graders, we're guessing. Now, if we only have 4 first graders, well, then we've got to come back to you with that. But the point is, right now, we simply need to begin working. And we need to do that work with the best information possible. And we also know that these surveys, at least in my last 8 months of experience, cause their own set of reactions and responses. And I would like, what I'm proposing to you for your consideration, realizing all the concerns around it, is I find our community, at least in the short time I've been here, when they see us moving forward and continuously answering questions and trying to provide the clarity, that at least it's moving us. That's been my experience. When we get stuck in the survey space, and then there's interpretations around the questions we ask, and then there's concerns based upon what people may or may not want. I just would say, here's the program as we understand it. This is why we're focusing on 5 days for these reasons. This is why we're providing a virtual academy for these reasons. This is how we will work on safety in the 5-day-a-week model. This is how we'll pivot. And we'll do our very best in the virtual model depending upon who signs up. And we're more concerned about specialized electives and our older kids in that model. And we're hoping, again, if I can pull it all together, that the vaccine has an impact. But it's still not perfect. So I offer that to you for your consideration.
I think what's hard about it is that we're asking for a commitment from our family. And I think it's hard for them to, there may be some cases that are very clear cut, but there also are going to be, aren't, whether they want. So I guess I would like to have seen something that gave us an indication of what the families in our district, or how they were leaning, at least to get an idea of where we are. It's just hard to think about having to commit to something that is, in many ways it's the same as what we've had for remote this past year, but there are many differences also that I think they're going to be really important, especially to high school.
Anything else? Otherwise, let's the public.
And just, Ordway, if the board wishes for us to do that, we'll be happy to do that. I'm just wanting us to be honest with you about it's April this week, and I know this sounds strange, while we are reopening the district, while we've continued the district this week, and preparing for summer, which we're trying to expand, and you're going to have that report very soon, and we're trying to prepare for the fall, we may not be able to keep all the balls in the air, even though we might want to. But if you would like for us to do something like that, I have absolutely no issue doing that. I just want us to be absolutely clear that however long the particular process takes, It just adds to what needs to go on the other side. That's all I'd like you to consider as you're deliberating.
Well, and I think that it's the important part of the aspect of it isn't necessarily to figure out everything that we can provide. It's making sure that the families that are struggling with making this decision have the information that they need to be able to feel comfortable making and confident making that decision, right? That commitment. And so I was really happy to see that you were going to have an information night. And I would ask those parents and those students that are really struggling to make sure that they go to that and that they ask the questions that they have, and then you come to that with that understanding of this is what we know and this is what we will provide. We might provide more, but this is the baseline, and so this is that expectation that you need to have with this program.
And another way we could frame this is if you feel you need to be in this remote program, tell us. See, my worry is we're creating all of these options. We're not going to judge your reason, but if you need to be in this remote program, tell us. And let's just say that there's 25 kids who need an advanced math. We'll do our very best. But because without judging any of the rationale, the answer to the question is, I need this remote program. Okay, then just tell us and let us figure it out.
And that's what I was kind of thinking when I was suggesting a survey, a very simple question. I want to come back and you're going to follow the guidance, the original in-person default. But then the other would be, I know I want remote. And then the other one is, I want remote, maybe some kind of variation thing in there in the related to vaccine. Or maybe the second question is just as simple as, I want remote, but it depends. And then you get this differentiation there. There are thousands of kids who want remote. You're going to be able to say, yeah, we can provide some advanced classes. You're not going to be committing to which ones. You're not going to be committing to, exact details, but at least you can kind of, they engage. Oh, I'm not a little tiny group. I'm a decent sized group.
My only concern is needing remote and wanting remote might be putting us right back into needing remote without judging and being clear about that is very different than wanting it. I would love for us to be able to explore this after we get out of this. Some of our kids love online learning. I'm simply saying to you as our board, that can't be our focus right now. That may be our focus next year or the year after. We would do a lot of collaborating with our community. It might align right with our deep learning and innovation strategic plan, and I'm all for that. But not right now, just because we can't necessarily do the I want, but we certainly must do I need. I would leave it up to people to decide, but I just offer that as a consideration.
Yeah, well, if it really is as binary as I need and the other, then your putting in for a transfer request takes care of that. I think what we're hearing is I need, well, but there's some caveats. And just listening to some of the choices that some of our families made just in the declaration, where they were picking between safety, but actually my teacher, versus, and I think some people really had to stretch themselves on that compromise. And I see your dilemma, Doctor.
But we will do our very best with whatever it is that you would like us to do, because these are the important dilemmas that we struggle with, and we're sharing them for your direction.
Okay, let's for the public comment. First speaker is Jennifer Wong.
That was some great discussion. Thank you, board, for bringing up all those points. This is clearly quite a bit of work that has gone into this presentation. I think what is obvious, and I think all the board members are calling it out, is that at the secondary level, at high school level, this is not equivalent to what we have today. And limiting it to the A to G requirements is going to be self-limiting.
And so you're going to get a return of people interested in a virtual academy limited by the course options they can take. And that doesn't really match up with when you think about our highest scoring high school in our district on all academic measures is Doherty High School. You have excessive number of AP level students. And over 90, I think it was 93% of those students chose remote. So you're telling those kids, this is not an option for you. And maybe the landscape of COVID in the fall is so different that it doesn't need to be. And gosh, we all hope so. But what that represents right there is not a viable option for their goals. And so I think that's what our board members are recognizing. And I don't know how you balance that because it is so chicken and egg, what comes first, and you cannot provide everything to everybody. But that is not what I'm prepared to say. So, again, my name is Jennifer Wong. I am a thrilled mother of 3 students graduated from this district, one who is a junior in high school. I am also a 4-5 combination teacher at elementary at Coyote Creek. I'm honored to serve that community. And I'm also a proud member of SRVUSD. But I come before you today broken. And I know that I'm broken for so many reasons. One, I am exhausted and I cannot sleep. I am triggered by innocent words, and I apologize, Dr. Malloy. Pivot is one of those words. I am irrational in my response to small added burdens. This week's COVID testing being off-site is really not that big a deal, but yet it feels like a crushing blow. And it feels like a burden that is an affront to every teacher who has returned to full in-person learning this week. And so I recognize that I'm broken and I want so much to be healed. And I know other teachers are also broken. And I know other parents are also broken right now. And I know our students are broken, and I suspect many of you feel broken. And I'm ready to move forward and heal. And I hope that our planning for the fall can reflect that. And it is much more thoughtful than the constant reaction we've been doing this year. I'm sorry, what? Okay. So I want to say that our priority for the fall, which is missing from this plan, is significantly smaller class sizes. Significantly smaller class sizes that will give our students the time and personal attention that they need next year. It will allow us to quickly identify the learning gaps and fill them. It will allow us to increase the speed and frequency of the feedback we give our students. It will allow us to adapt our curriculum to individualized learning. It will encourage participation and sharing within the classroom. And it will reduce just the noise and distraction in the room that will allow us to focus on learning and learning at a faster pace. And most importantly, it will give us the gift of connections. The teachers crave.
Jennifer,
I'll just finish my sentence then. It'll provide us the connections that we need, teacher to student, students to peers. And if you agree with anything that you heard me say, or you just don't want me to come back and talk at you and make your meetings longer, then I urge you to prioritize spending on class size and the elimination of combination classes at elementary. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Matthew Hoffman.
Just got a theory that this microphone works a little bit better than that one over there. It seems like that might be the case already. I can hear myself a little bit Dr. Malloy, thank you very much for what you said about moving forward and about taking decisive action and getting the process rolling. Because I think any kind of delay in this process here is just exactly what you said, bringing us back to what we saw last year and what so many people in the community complained about last year of just seeming like we were treading water and not going anywhere. Yes, is this ideal? Probably not. But is this something that we can maybe work with as a community and get behind and look towards the future of building this into some other kind of program that does have more thought and does have more possibilities? Yes. I mean, this is probably the independent study program of the future. It just hasn't been developed yet. So we just need to get to that point and do that as a community. But right now, we have a different priority, as Dr. Malloy pointed out, and we just need to get over that hump and make sure that we can be prepared for next year. But in this discussion, it brings up interesting points. I think one of the interesting points is looking at the homeschool situation. When you take this independent study program and then say, oh, but what about Cal? What about Doherty Valley? What about all these other things? Each one of those high schools has a program specifically tailored by that community for that school. And that comes in through the booster programs, through the ed funds, through these other programs that are specific for those schools. Just thinking about this presentation as it's been putting out there is talking about these kids kind of living in these two worlds. It brings to light that mind that in this situation, well, from the other side of the coin here, the people in the actual school sites who are planning for these extracurricular activities might not have access to these students or these families as resources to help plan those or to help fund those activities. So how do we bridge that gap? So I think that comes back to what I was talking about earlier about how this board right here has the ability not to create more time, but has resources to give to these schools to alleviate the burden like what Long was talking about. There is a situation that you guys can provide to these schools to help out both the students, the teachers, and the community and bring us all together and get us all behind a program like this, because we can maybe build this into its own homeschool eventually. And then we can all be happy with the kind of success that each one of the specialized programs gives to those students who choose it. So thank you very much for your consideration. I look forward to you guys being able to provide those tools to the community as soon as possible.
And last speaker for this item is Helen at Doherty Valley.
Hi, I was told I was all muffled when I came over there, so I'm going to try this microphone. Can you hear me better? Can you hear me better? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I want to piggyback off of Ms. Wong's point. It's kind of, what I wanted to speak as a former teacher as well. As a teacher, you know what the subject matter that you need to teach, which is basically guided by the state standards. Once you know that, a really good teacher needs to know how to assess your students. And then modern days, you call it individualized instruction, but individualized to our days is really difficult to do. We call them differentiated instructions. So that you need to sort of group your students into the levels, you assess them, then you teach them the content knowledge according to the standards that they need to understand. So this brings me back to the screen that I saw about Fast Bridge again. Nobody wanted to answer my question about Fast Bridge, so I looked it up. Fast Bridge is out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's not even a Californian company, and it was established in 2018. So I honestly don't believe that our teachers are as familiar with Bridge as Smart and Balanced, which has been the district for many, many years. As a teacher, I can probably look at the Smart and Balanced score. As a responsible teacher, of course, I would, know the sort of, where the students are coming from.
Excuse me, Helen, can you please stay on topic?
I am.
You're talking about the math, and we're talking about the reopening of 2120.
I am. So then, about that, it's important then to make sure our teachers are responsible to know about the new program you're implementing, Fast Bridge, for reopening as a parent I would like to request individual sites to give the parents the assurance that the next year teachers you will be hiring will be able to understand and be able to read the data that you are giving them from FastBridge. There's my point. And then also for the virtual academy, I think it's very interesting that Dr. Malloy never mentioned about College Connect and other options that we have given our, you know, more gifted and talented families. Their students are actually already above and beyond our high school, capacity, so that they're able to actually go to community college or other colleges and then bring their grades for approval. That is something I would do actually if I want my kids to be in the virtual academy. And I just have a question about that though. How are you going to select the teachers? Is it going to be our existing teachers applying for that program, or it's going to be appointed our high and mighty because you listen to them so
That's
much?
3 minutes, Helen.
Thank you.
President Norway, it's approaching 10 o'clock. I'd like to make a motion that we continue until 10:30.
Yes, thank you.
I second.
Motion was made by Board Member Mintz and seconded by Board Member Bratt. Call out vote. Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd. Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, that was our last public speaker on the item. So yeah, before we vote, I'll just say it's a tough one, right? It's chicken and the egg. And how do we go about planning when we don't know what families want? And families, how can they declare when they're not quite sure exactly what they're looking at for next year? But I think that I've also heard from throughout the summer and throughout fall that there were a lot of people who thought that because we didn't take the spring to plan and we had to wait until summer, that there were still very many questions and variables around. So I think that even though it's kind of difficult for families, I don't know, I'm thinking that at least if we can give the district kind of even a black and white, are you comfortable? Are you comfortable with a remote system, a virtual academy, or are you comfortable in coming back? That might be kind of just at least a sense of how many families we're talking about. And I do agree that, yes, secondary option, and as it's something to start off with, we need to make sure it's high school graduation requirements and A through G. Really thinking that we've been talking about code. I'm thinking that this could be something also that we can build upon, in the future, because we had students before pandemic who opted either venture or some form of combination of venture and the homeschool, or other options, not because of COVID, but because of other needs, either health, or social, right? The social issues that come up. I actually 2 years ago helped a student who started off with a district and actually did not end up graduating here because he had both health issues, but he also had he was bullied. He had a lot of things and he was afraid to go to school, in-person school. So he actually, from I think maybe 8th grade through high school, he went to an online school, online high school, online public high school. He did fine. He did fine. I helped him with, the admissions part. He did great in his school because he was safe medically. health wise, and he was not bothered with the social bullying and all that. And then actually, his mother and I talked about his. We didn't worry about his grades and his classes and stuff, but it was really more like his social, because he didn't have other students, right, his age to socialize with. And that actually was the worry. That's why I'm actually glad that we're giving this option of actually having students, even remote students, still, connected to their home school for other social things. So I just want to kind of put that out there, that I think that we're still so focused on COVID, and we should be, because it's still a problem right now, even with the vaccine and all. That's why we're still having masks on. But I think we need to also kind of think beyond that, and think maybe there are some students out there who, need something like this. And I think that sometimes we just need to start. Planning, is great, and when we need planning, I think we should keep going. But at some point, we just need to start, and then we can add and enhance what we have. So that's just my comment. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would ask if it would be possible. It's Tuesday of the last week before spring break, and then you have the informational meeting on the Monday after spring break, and then there's the rest of that week, and maybe a second week where people can opt into the remote academy. Would it be possible this week? And I understand if it just logistically makes sense, but to put out a communication, and I know people are going to roll their eyes when I say have a form or a poll, but I think that there's value in this, and I think we need to kind of get past the stigma of it. That just, they have to, if they're, and maybe just to our remote family, because that's the population that we're looking to, but asking them, perhaps it's on a scale of 1 to 5, perhaps it is binary. Are you leaning towards remote? Are you leaning towards in person? A simple question that just gives you some data, so that then as you have that information, so you can go into that information night on Monday with a little bit more of a sense of whether it's going to be 100 students or it's going to be 1,000 students, generally 10,000 students, generally, whatever, just to give a little bit more of a sense of providing not the exact information, but also not over-promising, not under-promising, just taking the temperature, as Trustee Hurd said. And so then that still allows for those 2 weeks for families to take that information that they've received at the information meeting, to be able to make that decision and have more information that they need to be able to make an informed decision, and still sticks to that timeline that you've talked about. I know that means that this week is going to be, and is going to be crazy, but if you have a sense of the difference between 100 choosing remote and 5,000 choosing remote, and then you get that information, then that can inform the informational meeting. I'm talking a little in circles, but.
So if the board's expectation is that we send out a news flash with a link to get a pulse, that's not hard. My experience in our community this year, though, is even if it's a pulse based upon the history, I'm starting to learn that everybody has their own experience of this last year, and it comes out very, very passionately sometimes. And then there's an expectation of all that we're going to provide before people might even be willing to give a pulse. If the board's direction is send out a news flash with a link and give a pulse with no expectation that we're going to be able to provide any further support to that process, then I think that could be doable. But when, if I may, a sentence in a board report that didn't have enough context caused the very important reactions that it did, that then becomes something we can't manage. I too appreciated Jennifer's comments, because One of the things I'm sharing with you is part of what's breaking people is so many variables. We just can't even consult and engage if that's going to be, frankly, what we have to do. It's impossible to do. A pulse is easy if we have those parameters. But I think the other piece that I'm hearing you wrestling with is, it's one thing, as we said, I think in a previous meeting, that we are planning for 5 days full-time, and that is our model. And if somebody needs remote, we're going to offer it, and we're not going to ask questions. That is a direction that's been on the table. And if the direction is now we're giving people choice, I know it may sound subtle, but it is a little bit different, because you are now talking, in my experience as I'm listening to your direction, and if you want us to do choice, then by all means, then we're going to do choice. But that has its implications too. And I don't want to not provide what kids want or need. We did comment in the presentation that we're already connecting with colleges and our college system, and I've been with the chancellor, and we're going to expand those programs, so that's an option. We want to hear from all the kids who might need it with no questions asked, and figure out what we can do without overpromising and under-delivering. But I think that you just have to decide if you want the pulse before you give the direction. As long as we can ask for the pulse without providing some of the feedback that some of our families might want. And I want to go on record saying we're not being unresponsive if we can't respond.
Yeah,
We
I
just
think I
can't.
think the pulse, or I would call it a gauge, is really that very discrete question that you asked a little while ago of, do you need this? And the need could be the medical reasons, it could be anxiety, it could be I am just not comfortable with what you are offering in person. I can't go there. But we have a sense of how big higher level classes, specialized classes, well, if we're doing it through one virtual academy rather than 30 or 40 or 4 high school or broader, right? So, but that way staff has a sense of how big that is and the group does. And really the ask needs to be your students, not your neighbors, not your not what you think's right for the system. This is about what you need so we can start the plan.
And the truth is, let's just say that we hear from 10,000 people that this is what they need. Well, then we plan, not just plan, we implement. We hear from 2,000 people, we hear from 30 people. At some point, we just need to know. And I'm not sure what age would tell us, except we'll have to plan that way or we'll have to plan this way. But at some point, we can't just keep holding off the decision, or what all of us in every district is struggling with, when do we plan for August? And if we wait, why, which I know you're not saying, but I'm just saying that if time has this way of flying by while we're trying to work through this stuff. And so we've already kind of mapped backwards. If we're going to have this by August 1st, we have to have this by July 15th. We have to have this by, you've got my point. So that's the only reason I'm saying a pulse done this week to get a quick sense, whether we get buy-in on that or not, whether it causes more questions or not. But by all means, you let me know if that's what you'd like us to do, we can do it.
Well, I think it would enable you in your meeting on the 12th to have a better sense of, there were a few people writing who wanted to know this, like they were buying a car, right? They want every little, and clearly you're not there. You're just beginning the planning. But I just think we need to step back, just so that idea how really big, how big the need option.
And in light of some of those questions, though, I think when I responded to say, assuming we get the numbers, we're planning exactly what you have gotten now, all those people said, thank you, that's all I needed. So whether we do have the list of 15 questions or not, based upon that answer, again, is probably something that we can just learn. But as I said, you decide based upon what you've heard from your stakeholders and constituents and families, and we'll do our very best.
If I can add to this a little bit. Yes, I think we want to get a sense for need, but the need has to be in terms of what this program is or is not. as we talked about earlier. And I think there's been a lot of clarification about that. The first question that came up over and over again in emails today was, that it's not venture. It's not independent study. It is remote. However, what's coming out from conversation today, it's remote with certain restrictions to it in terms of what those courses may or may not be. I think the question of, whether we do a survey or some other kind of mechanism before we ask for some kind of is whether we're looking to provide flexibility now beforehand, which seems very difficult to do and quite a challenge. I guess another approach is I'd be prepared to approve the staff recommendation. However, I think what I'm looking for is more flexibility on the back end as some of these questions do get clarified. So it solves the same issue of, people are being asked to make a decision now without having all of the facts that they may need personally to be able to do this. So it's clarifying that point that's included in here about being able to make a change, before the semester. Be prepared for 10,000 people to say yes now, but then they want to change to in person as we get. I think that's the issue that district's going to have to deal with at some point. And so I think the question of, are we giving them flexibility before the decision, or are we giving them flexibility afterwards? But I think it's going to be a question of how we handle that as it does arise, because I believe it's going to.
I think it's important to keep in mind, though, that flexibility for high school kids in specialized programming is less. So as much as it's hard to make a decision right now, and I get that, there are ramifications for not making a decision, and we've experienced that too. So again, whatever decision you make, all that I would ask is, if you'd like a pulse, please direct us to do that ASAP, so that we could get on with the piece related to scheduling and so forth shortly thereafter. I'm fine with that. It's just that if this pushes into May, I would worry about our ability to actually implement some of the work that I know we need to implement. And again, the thing that has been lacking for me in this seat, and I shared it before and I'm going to share it again, I am a collaborator by nature, and we are working at the speed of light and sound, and it just doesn't have the time. But when we get people in the room, our educators, our staff members, our team, we come up with ideas pretty quickly. I mean, we can call a meeting with secondary folks next week, not next week.
Maybe not.
Don't worry, not next week. Laura, I can't even look at you. Anyway, not next week. I said with sincerity, I already know this. We can call a group of people into the room who know this stuff, and in 3 hours' time, we could sort stuff out. That's how I've come to know so quickly how brilliant the educators in this space and our staff members in this space are. But we still need to close some doors as gently and as hospitably as we can to get to the next place. All that we can't do is kind of keep all the doors open while we're moving into staffing scheduling season, and then we move into the end of the season. So I think that what I'm hearing is that whether you want a pulse or not, that's one decision, and how you want us to approach the flexibility piece, realizing that we need some data to plan, or we get into that, you can move, assuming that there's room, because as we move further down the road, doors start getting closed. So when you're deciding on what you want to direct tonight, I'm hearing that the actual virtual academy as a concept is okay. I'm hearing that the commitment to 5 days a week being what we would hope if it was safe and well is still the direction. And we're just struggling with how to help people make a good choice around need and what time frame to do that in so that we can actually make the rest work. And that's That's been our executive discussion for the last 3 weeks. And so the only options I'm hearing is either do a pulse and then move forward, but by just pushing it back a week or two, or allowing the process to be the pulse. And then we'll come back to you with what our planning will be at the April 20th meeting based upon what we've seen. I mean, there's two ways of looking at it, but I
So I
don't.
guess I want to put the pulse question back on staff. Would the pulse help you at all? Would it allow you to say something different on April 12th to give people a more clarity, or would you basically be, making the same commitment? I mean, then there's the piece of the PLI, which has always been there, as well as the College Connect. And that would be a way for advanced classes. But again, we can't guarantee the DVC is going to provide all the courses that, if it really was all of Doherty Valley High School or most of Doherty Valley High School, that's a pretty big hit.
For me, the pulse doesn't give the information because it can change next week. The premise is, I need to be remote. Okay, tell us. You know what it's going to look like, assuming that we have the numbers. What are the unknowns? If there aren't enough kids who want that particular class, then we actually have some challenges because we all know now. Luckily, we don't have small high schools. Any part of this world that has small high schools has struggled with this forever because you just can't offer the same amount of options. So it's always about what do people want and then what can we plan? If there's a lot of kids in a high school level or an elementary level, if there's not a lot of kids, contingencies going on in our head for what that looks like. The pulse doesn't tell us anything unless it becomes the fact for now, at least more of a fact than a pulse. And then to Trustee Mintz's point, so if somebody feels in high school they need it, and then we see who that is, we can only provide A, not B. Then what I'm hearing Trustee Mintz says, can that student make a different choice? That I think we can do our very best to be as respectful and hospitable and as approachable as possible. And we could work to that aim. So the answer would be, we would really try to do that like we do now. We try to work out conflicts with schedules. We try to shift programs. But it's so hard to actually answer your questions until we actually see what we're dealing with. And so that's why I hope you're not hearing me stumbling. It's so hard to figure out what the next steps will be until we have a decent sense that this is where people want to land, assuming that they get their need. Because if they're kind of ambivalent, I really hope they come back to school full time. I really do. If they really need to be away, I hope that they tell us and we plan for it. The ideas around all the creative options that could come from this, I wish I could do it with you now, but that's what I would like to just push into next year for like the following year, just so that we can build some steps into this equation. Because I can think of all kinds of kids who just want to do 4th and 5th period remotely because they just like it. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not necessarily something we could do at the moment.
Okay, well, if the pulse isn't going to give staff any value, I don't see any point in pushing it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it would, to your point, it might cause more stress and decision-making in a sense, because now am I committing to that?
So, given that, yes, I will move that we approve staff's recommendation, and therefore the interdistrict transfer requests become your way to say, I need this, and then we're going to do the best we can to meet those needs. We just can't promise the world. You might not be able to have every course but going to see what courses the kids who choose that ask for and plan a program accordingly.
And if I may, Trustee Hurd, what I'm hearing, because I'm really trying to pull in everything that I'm hearing from all of you. We'll take back the piece around if, when it all settles, we really can't give somebody what they want. I'm not worried about elementary, and even for the most part, I'm not worrying about middle. And I'm not even worrying that much about 9th and 10th grade, with the exception of some electives, which I do feel strongly about because I'm a musician. I'll just say that. But I am worried about 11 and 12. And so maybe we've got to build something in where if somebody needs it and we gather that data and then we see exactly who that is and what they need, because we already have their course selection sheets. They've already done them. And we go back to them and they say, oh no, this isn't going to work. Well, then we'll work with them, even if there's a need, to figure out another strategy. That I think we can
I
build.
think that's actually
Yeah,
more
no, that's-
realistic than trying to promise some kind of semester break.
That could be something we can build into our planning, because this conversation has really pushed me that even at the January place, high school is a different situation than elementary school and such. So if what you're hearing me say is resonating and you pass this direction, I'll be sure we incorporate, whether we put it somehow in Word or I promise you I'm taking it back, this added piece. And thank you for your indulgence, because I'm kind of thinking this through in a public
But I
space while
do
I'm
think it's
listening.
important when people say, when you mean remote academy, virtual academy, is it like what I have now in remote? We can say yes, but, and we have to be really clear that it's not a teacher at your homeschool site, and it likely won't have the variety of classes. We'll try, but I mean, I think that's going to be a really important distinction, so we don't end up in an overpromise.
I will second the motion, but just to that point, I think it's really important that we possibly don't even say that it's remote like it is now. We can say very clearly it is not venture independent study. It's a remote program, a virtual program. Well, I think we need to very clearly define what that program is so people have a clear sense of what they'd be signing up for.
And I think you've used phrases like daily interaction with your teacher, things like that, that I think
Right, I
paint the
think that was
picture.
the
I also
most-
like that the name isn't remote academy, it's virtual academy, just so it's a little.
Right. I think that was the concern that everyone, that's the highest concern, was that my students, my kids, are not going to meet with teachers on a daily basis. So I think we just want to be clear about that.
And just won't cause confusion. It wouldn't necessarily look the same in terms of you chose your program and we promised to offer it. When we say it will look or feel the same, it's the issue around unstructured time, time with the teacher, school day starts at this time and goes till that time. That's what we mean when we say we're planning the same. To your point, Trustee Mintz, we can't necessarily say we're planning the same when it comes to their course options. Again, less worried in elementary, not so worried in middle, more worried in secondary. So we'll take that back to be sure that we clarify what's required and not cause confusion, but also not do that overpromising. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have a motion and second.
Motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Mintz. Call out vote, Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Great. Thank you.
Susanna, it's 10:30. I'll make a motion. We only extended a half hour, correct? Yeah, I'll make a motion to extend a half hour. Is that enough time to get through the pulled out items?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I think we're,
Okay.
yeah.
Second.
Motion was made by Board Member, seconded by Board Member Mintz. Call out vote, Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Great. So we're coming to actually the item 10.5, which were the pulled consent items. And so I think we're going to take this as a group, right? So Helen of Doherty Valley, please. You have comments on 11 point, sorry, 11.7, 11.8, 11.9, 11.10, Oh, 14. Okay. 14. Yes. Yeah, no, it's done as a group. Isn't it? Oh, sorry. Well, let me. They moved. Okay, so one at a time. Sorry, let me clarify because this is yeah. Because last time when we pulled some consent items through, so um,
Move approval of 11.7, 10.5.
oh, well, he's going to.
Thank you, trustees. Yes. Thank you, trustees. For clarification, the district certainly has dozens, if not 100 accounts kind of collectively at the Treasury. This account is simply a kind of another clearing account. It requires multiple layers of adults to process any transactions. And so it's absolutely in line with our existing accounts, and it's simply completely above board practice to ask the board's official permission when we make account amendments.
I have another public comment from Matthew Kaufman. Yeah, 11.7.
With a lot of these consent items, but also with the previous item, I think when there's these questions about what is the right thing to do and what's the community involvement and what's the community consensus, as Dr. Malloy pointed out, action is something that makes the most sense. And questions of getting pulses isn't really ideal. But what you guys are in a position of as trustees is to hold town halls and to talk directly to your constituents and get them all in a group together with your own actions. And I would really encourage you guys to take that action. To talk directly to your constituents in a dialogue fashion rather than getting piled on with emails. So that's
Okay, Helen, for 11.8, right?
Wait, to vote on 11.
Oh, sorry.
Made a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion was made by Board Member Mintz and seconded by Board Member Hurd. Call out vote. Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Okay, now we go to 11.8. I believe that was in the agenda. Yes, all the details was actually in the board packet. You- No, it's on the website. It's everything there. We get the same thing you do.
President Ordway, just so I can clarify,
Okay.
under the Brown Act, our public gets the same thing you do, and all this information is there. Just so that it's clear for the record that that has all been done, and it's on our website, and it's posted at the same time that you receive it.
Keith, if you could tell us.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. So our current rates for daily substitutes start at substitute teachers are $130 per day for short term, $150 per day for long term, and $170 per day for a retired teacher who substitutes for us. So what we're proposing here is that we weigh for the remainder of the year from those three rates and to put one daily rate for substitute service into place. That's $250 per day. That would put us at parity with the other two districts in the Tri-Valley area, Pleasanton and Dublin Unified. The intention would be to only hold those rates in effect for the remainder of this year at this time. And assuming that that's no longer needed for next year, we would revert back to the existing rates at that time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so I think these questions can be answered by, you know,
President Ordway, clarify. Sorry, mic is going. When we hear questions, it's up to you to decide if you want to ask us any questions because this is your agenda item. So we've heard from the speaker. It's now up to you to decide if you want us to comment, which we will, or if you wish to vote. That's your choice.
well, I think that, Helen, you can actually reach out to the district office and get all these questions. Again, all this information is in the board packet.
Madam President, I'm going to go ahead and make the motion that we approve these daily rates. It's important that we stay in parity with the other local districts because we're losing the opportunity to get subs with the lower rate.
I second.
The motion was made by Board Member Mintz and seconded by Board Member Bratt. Call out vote. Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
All right, 11.9.
I'll move on 11.9, but I will add that we do ask questions. It's why we get the packet in advance. We review it. There's an item on every cover sheet that says budget implications. This one, it says instructional material funds and or, read without my glasses, the
Like donations.
donations to purchase the book. They don't bring us items that are not covered in the budget. And Helen, I would be happy to sit down with you sometime and show you how this works and show you how to access it so that you can come prepared to these meetings with good questions that also don't just derail the meeting. Okay? I would love to help you understand how this works.
Second.
You do.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Mintz. Call out vote. Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Okay, 11.10.
Wellness centers are part of our LCAP plan. They have been planned for 2 years now, and there's already 2 open, one at Doherty Valley, one at California High School, and we're going to open 2 more, one at Monte Vista High School, one at San Ramon Valley High School, and the intake position is someone that helps make that work. It has all been planned for and is part of the plan. I'll move approval.
I second.
Motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Bratt. Call out vote. Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Oh, it's 11.
Well,
No.
11 was,
Was Shelley.
oh, why don't we,
Yeah, go ahead, Helen. 11:14.
Madam President, this item is for the California Environmental Quality Act Notice of Exemption for Monte Vista Elementary School Classroom Edition. I make the motion to approve.
I second.
Second.
The motion was made by Board Member Mintz and seconded by Board Member Bratt, I believe. Call out vote. Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
And then we have 11.11.
So I just wanted to make a comment. Starts. The reason I pulled this from consent agenda is because there's been some concerns expressed by certain community members about adding new positions time in relationship to our budget. And I wanted to make sure that our public and our community understands why these positions are imperative and are so important to our district at this time. And I felt like a discussion, at least giving us more information about what they're going to be doing would be beneficial. So thank you for finding that.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. So let me go on ahead.
Keith, I'll take it.
Yeah, I think
Thanks.
that's okay.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to do, I've got it. I wrote my notes out, so I'm good to go.
Thank you.
So the positions that you see before you are 2 different types. One is an expansion to an already existing position with no plan to backfill that position. Reason for that is because we are already doing that work. It aligns with our strategic directions, which I'll speak to in a moment. And it, in essence, is reflecting the work that is presently required, not just the work we're projecting going forward. So, for example, we know that our emerging strategic directions talk about deep learning and innovation, social emotional well-being, and equity. We also know that this year has taught us some great things regarding where it is that we need to focus our attentions in order to do this work well. The report states how over the last number of years, you have worked really hard to reduce positions. And I'm also bringing these insights to you as your newer superintendent, that a night like this is a perfect example. I totally believe that resources, human and material, need to be in the classroom and supporting our students. But this evening is a perfect example of the work that also needs to happen at the district level, because there are only so many of us when we talk about the work that needs to be done. I'm not a superintendent who likes to have a large district staff. I like for us to be, as I said, connected to schools, but we also need to ensure that we're doing the work. So when you look at this request, the coordinator of instructional technology is something that's absolutely required so we can move to the next level in terms of incorporating everything we've learned this year into our daily practice. The coordinator of research, evaluation, and student support is actually being paid for by a pot of money that comes from our state related to the whole concept of disproportionality, which means too many of our students, for example, being placed into special education programs. So this position is not only going to help us with that level of research, it's also going to help us monitor our improvement, and it's also going to help us with our testing, because our families have said they want us to expand opportunities for testing, and this year has been clear. The concept of communications and public information and public engagement. We've probably heard multiple times tonight that we need to focus our efforts on engagement. We need to support you in terms of the work that you're doing with our communities. We also have to support you in terms of your governance. And what I have found is that though the community engagement, public relations part of the position and the communications information part of the position have always been put together, that I'm finding that especially going forward with the kind of trust our community demands to have in us, that a focus is required in that area. The equity position is taking already existing position, realizing it needs to be at a level in the organization that it's influencing cabinet as well as our admin teams as well as our practice, which is why that's a request for an expansion. Our executive director of instructional services, once again, we are trying to transform learning, not just now, but going forward, and it's not a position that would be backfilled. So I just wanted to briefly share for the opportunity. We do have some gaps. While I say this, we're also going to be looking this next year where there might be other things that we don't continue to choose to do with your direction after the strategic directions are set, but that these positions at this time are so necessary for us to do that which we've already committed to. Available for questions, and Keith, forgive me, it's just I kind of worked through a bit of a 1, 2, 3 so I could put it out there at one time, but we, of course, you have the keys should any questions need to be asked that I wouldn't know how to answer.
All for you, Dr. Malloy.
Thanks.
Well, it sounds like some of this work is already being done, and we're looking to move our employees into their appropriate space. And then with our parent community being as active and engaged as they are, and as we move forward out of COVID and use what we've learned, we need to add these positions so that we can meet that demand and that we can keep moving forward and developing and growing. So I thank you. They will.
I'd like to add one more comment. I know as those reductions have been made since 2017 school year, board members, part of a conversation, asked, are we moving too quickly? And he didn't think so, but we always knew that if needed, we could put some. And I think it's important to recognize that staff, all staff throughout the district is working above and beyond. The particular team in the district office has worked 24/7 with very few breaks for over a year. And we need to acknowledge that. And when you're coming to us saying we can't sustain this, we need to listen. And I know sometimes that's a hard thing to say. It sounds like we're being frivolous with our money, but we're really not. We can't burn people out. We have to respect people. We want them to stay, and we want them to work. And so, did anybody second? I'll second Shelley's motion.
So I approve the consideration of the job description, administrative classified position. 11.
And I'll second. Sorry.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Hurd. Call out vote, Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Mintz.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Now we're just moving into 12.1. One board member reports. Any reports?
I'll
No.
just do a really quick one on traffics because it really is incredible how quickly Megan Wilkerson, our program manager, got traffics up and moving and kids on buses and selling passes. Super excited that we're open every day because she's selling more.
Great. Thank you.
My report, just real quick. I really appreciate, I know everyone else was doing the same. I was here at Sangamon Valley High School yesterday morning, watching the students arrive. You know, I think this is our largest site in terms of students returning to class. And it was really exciting to see the number of students coming to class for the first time, you know, and the combination of the cohorts. So looking forward to a great spring break next week and seeing everything get on track and moving forward through the end of school.
Yeah, and I quickly mention that it's been a few weeks now, but the Doherty Valley PTA is doing a series with students on the Doherty mentality, and it was very informing in terms of the social and emotional wellness and pressure that the students specifically within the Doherty community have, and just hearing those student voices and them telling the parents and the people that are helping them make decisions their concerns was very empowering, and I believe they're continuing on with that series throughout the rest of the year.
So I had the pleasure of doing lunch duty today at Neil Armstrong Elementary, and I was just so blown away with the setup they had outside for all the kids and how well behaved and great all the kids were and following all the instructions asked, and they were so happy to be there. Most of them were happy to be there. Some of them were like, my mom made me come, but it was just great to see. And the principal there is just it really impressed me, the connection. It was a pleasure. I'm going back tomorrow.
Nice. Yeah. I'll just quickly say that I'm looking forward actually to, I was invited, I think we might always be invited, I'm not sure, but to the Courageous Conversation at Trail Run tomorrow evening, I believe. And they're going to kind of highlight on the anti-Asian hate. And just getting parents and, you know, to be, share what they're feeling and around all this. So anyway, superintendent report.
I'll just be very brief. I want to thank Cindy and Greg Pitzer and Logan for moving us here and for all of the heavy lifting that took place to make that happen. So thank you. I know, Tammy, you assisted us with running yellow papers, so I don't want to forget you because that was a helpful link. We'll get that sorted out for the next meeting. And I just want to say publicly to our entire staff for the heavy lifting that I'm grateful, and to our district team, some of whom are here, some who just left now. I'm amazed each and every day for how hard and creative and important their work is, as I mentioned. Thank you.
Well, I think we're actually going back into close. So adjourn, open. We're going to close, and I think we're coming back up. Okay.